Everyone. Welcome to the 2021 gathering. Housepace is our online workspace where we will access all the upcoming workshops, morning plenary speeches, ask questions, and connect. Each morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we will log on to the plenary page to watch live keynotes and panels and have the opportunity to ask questions to our presenters. Make sure to click on the play arrow to start streaming the live video. To submit your questions during the Q&A periods, you can input text into the following chat box. We encourage you to reply and like others' comments. When we are beginning our daily workshops, they can be found in either the main menu or by navigating our drop-down menu. Once you select the workshop you're interested in joining, please follow the Zoom link provided or dial in details to participate. Thank you. We look forward to connecting, and if you have any questions regarding Housepace, don't hesitate to reach out.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue au rassemblement. Housepace, c'est notre espace de travail en ligne où nous aurons accès à tous les ateliers à venir, aux plénières du matin, où nous pourrons aussi poser des questions et entrer en contact les uns avec les autres. Chaque matin à 11h heure de l'Est, nous nous connecterons à la page des plénières pour regarder en direct les discours principaux et les panels. Nous aurons la possibilité de poser des questions à nos présentateurs. N'oubliez surtout pas de cliquer sur la flèche de lecture pour lancer la diffusion de la vidéo en direct. Pour soumettre vos questions pendant nos périodes de questions-réponses, vous pouvez saisir du texte dans la boîte de dialogue suivante. Nous vous encourageons à répondre et à aimer aussi les commentaires des autres. Lorsque nous commençons nos ateliers quotidiens, vous aurez la possibilité de les retrouver soit dans le menu principal, soit en naviguant dans notre menu déroulant. Une fois que vous aurez sélectionné l'atelier qui vous intéresse, suivez le lien Zoom fourni ou utilisez les informations de connexion téléphonique pour participer. Surtout, n'hésitez pas à nous envoyer un message si vous avez des questions concernant Housepace. Merci, nous sommes vraiment impatients de vous retrouver.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 2021 gathering. Housepace is our online workspace where we will access all the upcoming workshops, morning plenary speeches, ask questions, and connect. Each morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we will log on to the plenary page to watch live keynotes and panels and have the opportunity to ask questions to our presenters. Make sure to click on the play arrow to start streaming the live video. To submit your questions during the Q&A periods, you can input text into the following chat box. We encourage you to reply and like others' comments. When we are beginning our daily workshops, they can be found in either the main menu or by navigating our drop-down menu. Once you select the workshop you're interested in joining, please follow the Zoom link provided or dial in details to participate. Thank you. We look forward to connecting, and if you have any questions regarding Housepace, don't hesitate to reach out.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue au rassemblement. Housepace, c'est notre espace de travail en ligne où nous aurons accès à tous les ateliers à venir, aux plénières du matin, où nous pourrons aussi poser des questions et entrer en contact les uns avec les autres. Chaque matin à 11h heure de l'Est, nous nous connecterons à la page des plénières pour regarder en direct les discours principaux et les panels. Nous aurons la possibilité de poser des questions à nos présentateurs. N'oubliez surtout pas de cliquer sur la flèche de lecture pour lancer la diffusion de la vidéo en direct. Pour soumettre vos questions pendant nos périodes de questions-réponses, vous pouvez saisir du texte dans la boîte de dialogue suivante. Nous vous encourageons à répondre et à aimer aussi les commentaires des autres. Lorsque nous commençons nos ateliers quotidiens, vous aurez la possibilité de les retrouver soit dans le menu principal, soit en naviguant dans notre menu déroulant. Une fois que vous aurez sélectionné l'atelier qui vous intéresse, suivez le lien Zoom fourni ou utilisez les informations de connexion téléphonique pour participer. Surtout, n'hésitez pas à nous envoyer un message si vous avez des questions concernant Housepace. Merci, nous sommes vraiment impatients de vous retrouver.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 2021 gathering. Housepace is our online workspace where we will access all the upcoming workshops, morning plenary speeches, ask questions, and connect. Each morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we will log on to the plenary page to watch live keynotes and panels and have the opportunity to ask questions to our presenters. Make sure to click on the play arrow to start streaming the live video. To submit your questions during the Q&A periods, you can input text into the following chat box. We encourage you to reply and like others' comments. When we are beginning our daily workshops, They can be found in either the main menu or by navigating our drop-down menu. Once you select the workshop you're interested in joining, please follow the Zoom link provided or dial in details to participate. Thank you. We look forward to connecting, and if you have any questions regarding HowSpace, don't hesitate to reach out.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue au rassemblement. HowSpace, c'est notre espace de travail en ligne où nous aurons accès à tous les ateliers à venir, aux plénières du matin, où nous pourrons aussi poser des questions et entrer en contact les uns avec les autres. Chaque matin à 11h heure de l'Est, nous nous connecterons à la page des plénières pour regarder en direct les discours principaux et les panels. Nous aurons la possibilité de poser des questions à nos présentateurs. N'oubliez surtout pas de cliquer sur la flèche de lecture pour lancer la diffusion de la vidéo en direct. Pour soumettre vos questions pendant nos périodes de questions-réponses, vous pouvez saisir du texte dans la boîte de dialogue suivante. Nous vous encourageons à répondre et à aimer aussi les commentaires des autres. Lorsque nous commençons nos ateliers quotidiens, vous aurez la possibilité de les retrouver soit dans le menu principal, soit en naviguant dans notre menu déroulant. Une fois que vous aurez sélectionné l'atelier qui vous intéresse, suivez le lien Zoom fourni ou utilisez les informations de connexion téléphonique pour participer. Surtout, n'hésitez pas à nous envoyer un message si vous avez des questions concernant HowSpace. Merci, nous sommes vraiment impatients de vous retrouver.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 2021 gathering. HowSpace is our online workspace where we will access all the upcoming workshops, morning plenary speeches, ask questions, and connect. Each morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we will log on to the plenary page to watch live keynotes and panels and have the opportunity to ask questions to our presenters. Make sure to click on the play arrow to start streaming the live video. To submit your questions during the Q&A periods, you can input text into the following chat box. We encourage you to reply and like others' comments. When we are beginning our daily workshops, they can be found in either the main menu or by navigating our drop-down menu. Once you select the workshop you're interested in joining, please follow the Zoom link provided or dial in details to participate. Thank you. We look forward to connecting, and if you have any questions regarding HowSpace, don't hesitate to reach out.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue au rassemblement. HowSpace, c'est notre espace de travail en ligne où nous aurons accès à tous les ateliers à venir, aux plénières du matin, où nous pourrons aussi poser des questions et entrer en contact les uns avec les autres. Chaque matin à 11h heure de l'Est, nous nous connecterons à la page des plénières pour regarder en direct les discours principaux et les panels. Nous aurons la possibilité de poser des questions à nos présentateurs. N'oubliez surtout pas de cliquer sur la flèche de lecture pour lancer la diffusion de la vidéo en direct. Pour soumettre vos questions pendant nos périodes de questions-réponses, vous pouvez saisir du texte dans la boîte de dialogue suivante. Nous vous encourageons à répondre et à aimer aussi les commentaires des autres. Lorsque nous commençons nos ateliers quotidiens,
Many of us grew up believing that the poor would always be with us. We came to believe that ending poverty was a foolish dream. Then, Canada lifted more than 1 million Canadians out of poverty. Over 6 years, our poverty rate dropped from 15% to 11%. This was the lowest rate in recorded history. Why? Because we have poverty reduction plans. The Government of Canada and most provinces and territories have a plan, Cities Reducing Poverty is the largest network of its kind in the world. We have a plan. Many of our partners have plans to end homelessness, provide a basic income, end child poverty, end disability poverty, and to end working poverty. We need to unite these plans. Let's build a united plan. Together, we can end poverty. Join Tamarack and Mayor Naheed Nenshi online live from Calgary, May 5th and 6th, 2021. Learn more at endpovertyby2030.ca.
We are honored to introduce you to Elders Wallace and Florence Alexson, who are elders for our gathering over these 2 days. Elders Wallace and Florence work together with Vibrant Communities Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. They will lead us in an opening blessing and prayer. And we think that it's important that we start the day centered and calm in full recognition of the heritage of this land. Elders Wallace and Florence, could you please lead us with your wisdom, reflection, and prayer?
Thank you. And we'll get started immediately. We want to start off with the prayer. I'll start off with the prayer, and then I want to end with an honor song, honoring our Creator, our people, and our land. We start off with a smudge each and every time, so that's our way of blessing the day and everything that goes with it. So, without further ado, we'll start with the prayer immediately. Get your money too. Gina Nishka gonna get to you, not gonna be going to Mishumis. Good you go, Bisha and Mano. Gina Nishka gonna get to you, not gonna be going to Mishum. Creator God, we thank you for coming to sit with us today. We thank you for looking after your people in Mishumis, grandfather. Thank you for coming to sit with us. I want to ask for good things to happen in this meeting today. Good things to happen in our future. It's a good future that's coming up with looking after our people, our children, especially. Thank you. I ask you to look after all the leadership, all the students, all the children. We ask you to look after everybody today. Ask a blessing for each and every one of us, right from the unborns to Shumananak, Kukumananak. Thank you for that. Thank you for being there when we need you, Creator. You good? Thank you. I want to sing a short song honoring our spiritual entities. Thank you for coming to sit with us, Creator. Look after us today. Bless us in our endeavors that we're about to embark on. Thank you very much for listening. Carry on.
Thank you so much. Elders Wallace, Elder Florence, thank you. And enjoy the kids today that are home with you today. So lovely. Thanks so much for getting us started in such a good way. Hello, everyone. My name is Shauna Sylvester, and I have the absolute pleasure of serving as the chair of the board of Tamarack Institute. I also get to spend my days at the Simon Fraser University Morris J. Watt Center for Dialogue, where I serve as the executive director. And today I'm zooming in from the unceded traditional territories of the Wasanic, the Tulalip, and Stamanis people on the West Coast, just on the other side of Tawasin. I'd like to say welcome, bienvenue, bonjour à tout le monde. On behalf of the board, the staff, the volunteers, and the giant community that is Tamarack. And today we are gathered with that community. It is such a pleasure to be here with you. Je suis très, très heureux d'être parmi vous. And you're going to see me and our co-CEO, our co-MC, Brock Carlton, a fair bit in the next day as we go through and help to steward this great program with you. Over to you, Brock. And as everything, sometimes we can't hear each other because of the muting, but there he is.
Here I was all the time yesterday. I never got caught on mute. So I start the day, oh well, it's Zoom. Anyway, welcome everybody. Thank you, Shauna, for that introduction. And thank you to the elders for that wonderful prayer and those thoughts. I am vice chair of Tamarack board, so I have the same pleasure that Shauna has in working with other board members and all the folks in the Tamarack staff and Tamarack community. I am former CEO of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, but I retired from that position last July and have since been spending time with my grandchildren, doing a fair bit of cycling and canoeing. I'm also a partner in the Empathic Leadership Institute, which is an institute dedicated to training and mentoring and coaching around empathic leadership for young leaders in our world today. J'aimerais aussi dire bienvenue à tous les francophones qui sont parmi nous aujourd'hui. C'est bien content de vous voir. It's a really important event we're having this today and yesterday and today. You know, before COVID, 1.3 million people, Canadians, were lifted out of poverty. We know how to end poverty. We've learned how to do this. And as we come out of this COVID, now is the time to build the capacity towards a future without poverty. And Tamarack is dedicated to all of that work. But there's something new at Tamarack, which is featured today. Last year, we added Communities Building Youth Futures to our suite of initiatives. The project uses a proven approach to building collaborative solutions with and for youth. You're going to hear more about this later in the morning, but it makes so much sense to work on you, to focus on youth. It's recognized that youth are the building blocks of communities. It's also been proven that nations that invest in youth have better economic outcomes for the whole of the population. So what's important today is that we learn from each other, we learn how to do things differently, we learn how to do new things. But what's really important is what you do when you leave, that you either continue doing what you're doing because you know it works, and that's been affirmed by the conference and the discussions today, or you think of doing things differently because what has been happening isn't working. And by sharing and learning from each other, you'll learn how to do things differently going forward. So that's what's so important about today. So I also just want to add one more thing, Shauna, before I pass this back to you. In the pre-COVID times, we all went to conferences, and I always thought at a conference there were three types of people. There were the keeners who were really into the content and wanted to learn more and do things differently. There were the tourists who just kind of went to a conference to go shopping, to sit in the bars and go to the hospitality suites. And then there are the prisoners. The prisoners are the people with their arms closed who are kind of pissed off. Their boss told them they had to be there. They're not really into the conference at all. What I find really fascinating about this conference and this group of people is that everybody's a keener. Everybody's so interested in learning and listening and gaining new wisdom so you can do differently and do better. And it gives me great hope for the future when I think of all the keeners on this Zoom call today.
So, keeners, yes. And there are a number of us here today. So we are a big group. I just want to give you a sense of who is out there in our house-based community and on Zoom with us. There are 700 registrants for the End of Poverty Summit, plus 360 new participants from Communities Building Youth Futures. So today we are over 1,060 people, and that's just awesome. And wow, does that ever speak to the skills and capacities of the Tamarack community, their staff, and all of the networks that have really mobilized people to be here today. Now, I also want to say a little bit more about who is within that over 1,000 people. And these include 300 communities reducing poverty members, and that represents over 80 communities. Among us are 92 people with lived and living experiences of poverty. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at HouseSpace beforehand, but some of the stories were just so powerful. It's had such a profound impact on me just going back and reading through some of those stories. So thank you to those who shared them. There's also a number of groups here, and I want to do a call out to them. These are groups with over 10 people. End Poverty Edmonton, hello. Guelph and Wellington Poverty Task Force, the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, the Regional District of Central Okanagan, hello from another BC participant, the Ottawa Food Bank and Parkdale Food Centre, Vibrant Communities Charlotte County, City of Toronto, City of Windsor, United Way Windsor and Essex, and a big shout out to the people from Calgary's Enough for All. There are over 30 people from Calgary here today, and I know Elders Wallace and Elder Florence are also from Calgary. There are also many other collaboratives that are bringing groups of 3 to 9 people. Now, you talked about the keeners, Brock. It is true that maybe one of the things, most years you might get 1 or 2 people from a community. But this time, I think the virtual community has actually made this more accessible for all of us. I also want to do a big shout out to those who joined us today, and that's 139 are from Communities Building Youth Futures from 12 communities across Canada. To all of the youth or serving organizations, a big welcome. 28 of you are Communities Building Youth Futures partners. 26 are affiliated through the new National Collaborative Committee. And there are 50 young people here today. So just a big welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you. You could be anywhere else, but you're here. And that's important as we share this time together. There are people from coast to coast to coast. Now, I don't know about the rest of you from BC and Alberta. We had to get up a little bit earlier than the rest of you, but we also have folks from Whitehorse, Yukon, and those over in St. John's, Newfoundland. A big hello. I also want to say hello. There are 12 folks from the United States, and I'm in this exclave in the US, just on the other side of the border in Tawasin. So welcome to those from the US as well. So wherever you are, want to encourage you to go over to the HouseSpace event page, take a look at it, introduce yourself, share a story if you like, tell us how you are working to end poverty. We really want to hear your stories. Over to you, Brock.
Yeah, I was looking at, it's interesting you talk about HouseSpace, because I was looking at it yesterday and I was seeing people sharing their stories and sharing their experiences and sharing documents. It's such a wonderful space for sharing information and personal experiences. So I'd really encourage you to do that. J'aimerais aussi dire que pour nos francophones à travers le pays qui sont avec nous aujourd'hui, une chaleureuse bienvenue à tous et à toutes. We have a really amazing day planned. And as we were just, Sean and I were just talking about HouseSpace, you can find all the details on HouseSpace. So go check it out. But I'm just going to do a quick précis of the day. First, we're going to start with Minister Bardish Chagar. Will provide a framing for the day. She'll be followed by a keynote speech by Melody Barnes. We will then welcome Tamarack Director of Communities Building Youth Futures, Nathalie Blanchette, to moderate a panel discussion on building youth futures without poverty. And Minister Melody Barnes and Minister Chagar will join that panel. Also on that panel will be the Tamarack board member and Youth Climate Lab co-founder Ana Gonzalez Guerrero, Brandon Montour, Youth co-chair of the National Collaborative Committee, and Alex Pawlinski, coordinator of the Communities Building Future Youth Futures in Prince Albert. At 1:40, we'll take a 20-minute break and then regroup at 2 o'clock Eastern Time for afternoon workshops. There'll be a special youth evening designed by Youth for Youth and youth serving organizations. Again, you can find both the brief and detailed agendas below on HowSpace. So at Tamarack, we really know that people learn in different ways. So if you digest your learning differently, visit Take a Break and explore some of our tips for doing 5-minute mindfulness, energizing home workouts, visualizing, drawing, or expressing what you've heard. We encourage you to get up and move around as you need to. If you're able, each time we switch sessions or workshops, try going and moving from sitting to standing, or vice versa, or find a new room to join from. The main thing is give yourself permission to take your own breaks. All the sessions are recorded and can be shared later. So take your time, learn the way you learn, enjoy the learning experience, and make the most out of this event and this wonderful day.
Hopefully some of the time I'll get you, Brock, stretching with me, because we'll take a few stretch breaks through the day as well. That's where you get to see that I'm not quite as coordinated as I could be, but it'll be fun to do that together.
Well, I'll stay seated because I'm in shorts. I'm
going to stay seated too, but we can do that together, I'm hoping. I want to take a few minutes. As Brock said, there's Tamarack, when we come together, we really try and create a very safe space for conversations. And that's a really important part. Some of us are sharing stories. Some of us have gone through lived experience. And so as we do this, Tamarack and its communities have created a set of shared principles for participation. I'm just going to go through those. They're on HowSpace, but just to remind us that as we're listening, we are listening and we're holding back judgment. That would be the first of our principles. As people are telling stories, we really want to make sure it's safe for them. So ask that you respect the privacy of others. Please don't share those stories in personal terms when people leave here. Of course, we have a zero tolerance for racist or discriminatory comments. We're in a dialogue, and there's always this desire to really move and bring up other ideas and tangents, but we're going to ask you to stay focused on the topics, particularly in the workshops, and to build on the ideas of others. Really kind of listen for the center. How can I build on people's ideas? And try and keep to one conversation at a time. Of course, the technical side of this, if you aren't speaking, we ask you to mute. And that's just so that we're not hearing ambient noises coming back. We have an exciting aspect of this conference, and that is the fact that we have a graphic recorder. Asma Basalama is an artist graphic recorder with experience working with NGOs and community development projects. She's been working as a graphic recorder for 5 years while pursuing a career in law. She has dreams of combining visual facilitation and helping her community with legal issues. That's quite a combination. After the plenary is done, you can find Asma's recording in HowSpace. You'll see a link for it. And there'll be also a chance for you at the end to ask Asma questions. So really excited to have that part. And if you have a chance, look at what happened yesterday. There's a great graphic recording from yesterday's session. You'll get a quick insight into our conversations if you weren't a part of that. Now, I'm going to move to getting underway in terms of the actual proceedings of our session and get ready to introduce our first speaker who's going to frame our discussions today. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Bardish Chagar, Federal Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth. Previously, she was the leader of the government in the House of Commons and the Minister of Small Business and Tourism. Minister Chagar was first elected as a Liberal member of the House of Commons of Canada in 2015. She supported elections and has been involved in the democratic process since she was 13 years old. Oh my goodness. And I love the fact that she came up and was raised through this whole part of the history of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We're part of a generation working on many policy issues, including the advancement of same-sex marriage rights. She's devoted to inclusion and community building, and she's worked with the Kitchener-Waterloo Multicultural Centre to foster diversity within the community and provide opportunities for social and economic engagement. We're very excited that Minister Chagar is opening today's forum. I'm hopeful that we have Minister Chagar ready. I think I can hear you, and I just want to make sure that we're ready to go. Minister Chagar, thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Shauna. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction. And to everyone watching, hello, bonjour. I'm joining you from Waterloo, Ontario, on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. And I want to thank the Tamarack Institute for bringing us together today and for your work to build a more equitable society for all through community action and change. Thank you also to Brock Carlton and Shauna Sylvester for that beautiful opening blessing and song. Il est juste que nous commencions sur une note de positivité et d'espoir, parce que c'est ce que les jeunes représentent. You are our most important resource. You are creative and passionate. You are full of potential and possibility. As Prime Minister Justin Trudeau often says, young people are not only the leaders of tomorrow, you are the leaders of today. You are at the forefront of every single movement to make Canada an even better place. You are taking action on climate change, fighting for gender equality, LGBTQ2 rights, and the rights of people with disabilities. You stand against all forms of racism, discrimination, and hatred. And today, you're tackling poverty. Vous comprenez que la vraie diversité et l'inclusion significative de tout le monde, quoi qu'il arrive, sont essentielles pour mettre fin à la pauvreté. You have a vision of a more prosperous, more equitable, and consciously more inclusive Canada, and you fight for it every single day. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected all Canadians and disproportionately certain segments, including young people. At a time in your lives when you should be expanding your horizons and looking outward, you're being asked to do the exact opposite. Shelter in place, stay at home, and self-isolate, all for the good of the public. And you are doing it. You are taking care of each other, your families, and neighbors. You have been patient and compassionate. You bring people along, you listen, you lead. Je veux que vous sachiez que nous vous voyons et que vos sacrifices sont appréciés. I want you all to know that we see you and your sacrifices are appreciated. We also see that the impact on your lives has been significant, and our government knows that you need to have access to quality, lifelong educational and training opportunities. You need meaningful summer jobs, co-op placements, internships, and apprenticeships that will give you the work experience you need to enter the job market with confidence and build futures for yourselves. And that is why in Budget 2021, we propose to invest over $5 billion over 5 years in youth. Because we know that when every young person has the tools, resources, and support they need to succeed, every single one of us benefits, communities benefit, Canada benefits, the world benefits. Over the next 2 days and beyond, keep thinking about this in your daily work. What can we do differently? What can we do better? What do we need to change to make sure that every young person has every chance to be the best version of themselves, to be their true, authentic selves? And before I pass over the screen, I know it's been tough, and I'm grateful to all involved in the organization of the Tamarack Institute's End of Poverty and Community Building's Youth Future Conference. I'm really happy that we've all come together virtually. I know sometimes we just need to take a break, so don't hesitate to do that, because as you fight for everyone else, we also need you to take care of yourselves because each of you matters. I really hope that you're keeping well and safe, and we're going to do whatever we can at the federal level to help Canadians get through to the other side of this pandemic. And now, I'd like to introduce the keynote speaker for today. This woman is a powerhouse, an attorney by profession. She's also CEO of her own company. She has provided strategic advice to the likes of President Barack Obama, Senator Edward M. Kennedy, and others. Elle a travaillé sur toute de la réforme de l'enseignement supérieur et des soins de santé à la campagne de Michelle Obama pour mettre fin à l'obésité chez les enfants, pour n'en nommer que quelqu'un. She also chaired the prestigious Aspen Institute Forum for Community Solutions and co-founded the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund that supported more than 1 million young people in opportunities to end poverty and build better futures. So please join me in turning the screen over to the fantabulous Melody Barnes.
Thank you so much. And first, I want to thank Paul Bourne and the Tamarack Institute for inviting me to be part of this wonderful, wonderful gathering and for introducing me to Minister Chagar. We had a great webinar conversation in March. I am her newest fan, and I really appreciate that warm introduction. Thank you so very much. I also want to take a moment before saying anything else just to talk about Paul Bourne, who announced his retirement last week. I first met Paul many years ago when, much to his surprise, we had a conversation in my office in the West Wing of the White House. You see, I am proud to say that I consider myself at least part Canadian. I have family in Saskatoon because my Canadian husband grew up there. And he brought Paul to meet me on a beautiful spring day. I know Paul still remembers the cherry blossoms being in bloom. And who would have thought then that that would be the beginning of such a wonderful relationship? In the years since, I have had the privilege of working with Paul to create greater opportunities for young people in Canada and in the United States. And I know him to be a magnificent leader. In fact, rarely do so many owe so much to just one person. But on both sides of the border, we are forever in Paul's debt. And I want to say congratulations, Paul. I join your friends and colleagues in wishing you well and thanking you for everything that you've done. Today, our focus is on the future for youth and young adults. And I believe how we can create wealth for and with them. And I want to be clear when I use the phrase and the term wealth. I'm talking about far more than dollars and cents. I'm speaking holistically, the sum of the resources an individual may access or use in support of both their daily activities and in pursuit of their long-term lifetime goals. I have worked on this issue for many, many years, most recently, as Minister Chagar said, in the White House and with colleagues at the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions. But my roots inform and animate everything I do. So I want to start out by telling you just a little bit about me and why that's important and how these things connect. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. Now, for those of you who haven't been to the States or to the South, Richmond is a city of about 225,000 people. It's about 100 miles south of Washington, D.C. And what's important for you to know about Richmond right now, for the purpose of our conversation today, is that its history and the present have created a tale of two cities. A few years ago, Virginia Commonwealth University Center on Society and Health conducted a study looking at the connection between neighborhood conditions and health. The researchers produced a series of life expectancy maps for certain cities as part of that project. And one of those maps was for Richmond. The map shows how the outcomes of inequality literally manifest themselves in terms of life and death. Gilpin Court is a public housing community in Richmond, and Westover Hills is another community, a more affluent community. The two of them are separated by about 4 miles. Yet the people in these communities experience a shocking 20-year disparity in the number of years they are expected to live. In Gilpin Court, the average life expectancy is about 63 years. In Westover Hills, it's 83 years. So why? Well, I can tell you, because those who live in Gilpin Court are undereducated. Few have an education beyond high school. Most are reading at a grade 8 level. The unemployment rate for those who are 16 years or older in Gilpin Court is about 19%. In Westover Hills, it's 2.2%. And those living on income below the federal poverty level in the United States, about 73% of those living in Gilpin Court, 1.1% of those in Westover Hills. Now, this story gets told in one community after another, and I'm sure in Canada as well. And the implications for youth and young adults is significant. So the question is, how do we address this challenge? And what must be done and where? Do we fix these problems at the national level, in our cities, in our towns? Well, my opinion is that this isn't an either-or story. We need to move beyond the tyranny of the or and focus on the genius of the and. Now, that brings me to the work that I did when I was director of the White House Domestic Policy Council. I had the privilege of working with President Obama when he created the bipartisan White House Council for Community Solutions. And President Obama knew that the answers to every issue wouldn't be found in Washington, D.C. And I can promise you that he often told us that. Go out, see what's going on in the country. We're going to find answers, to smart solutions to our big problems outside of the federal Capitol. We needed to understand what was happening on the local level and what the national government could do to support that work. So while traveling around the country to learn about local strategies, the White House Council specifically asked this question: why are some communities successfully tackling big challenges while others are not? Not surprising to any of us who have done work in community, the council found that the successful ones were working across sectors on an intentional and coordinated fashion with shared and clear goals, strong communication, and data to inform their work. But the White House Council's work wasn't theoretical or abstract. In fact, I remember talking to members of the council, and they said, given this challenging moment in the United States, remember, this was during the time of the Great Recession, how do we focus this issue, or the lens that we're finding of solutions in local communities, on some of the biggest challenges that are facing us right now? So they decided to take on a very specific challenge, that of opportunity youth. The 6.7 million young people between 16 and 24 years old who are out of school or work. And they brought heightened attention to the significant number of young men and women who are often overlooked and prone to fall through the cracks of our siloed system. The council's work also catalyzed the National Council of Young Leaders, which originally was comprised of 20 young adults who suffered everything from child abuse, homelessness, loss of family members to violent means, often abusive or neglectful foster care systems, gang violence, abandonment by teachers who told them that they were, quote, doomed to fail. Imagine that. You're 14, 15, 16 years old, and an adult that ought to care about you, who's there to help you, has told you that you are doomed to fail. And also government policies that undermine the capacity of Native American or First Nations tribes. The list of challenges go on and on and on. But here's what the Council of Young Leaders said about themselves. And this is a quote: "We aim to be a positive force for good in the world, motivated by love and guided by a strong moral and spiritual compass. We look to our elders and those who hold the keys to power to support our efforts. We are looking to our peers to join forces and align resources with us as we fight for equal opportunities for all young people, to experience the benefits of public and private investment in our education, employment, personal development, and opportunities to serve and give back to our communities." That's what they said. And then they listed the principles for action, their principles: love, responsibility, forgiveness and empathy, community empowerment, inclusion, visibility, collaboration, accountability for results, respect for faith, humility, and planning. Alongside many of those young adults, one of the first things that the council did was start to change the narrative about them. You see, in years past, and we all know this, we've heard this, the narratives about opportunity youth reinforced negative stereotypes. They supported insufficient and poorly crafted or even harmful policy. They aided and abetted inequity. In the United States, up until the 1970s, most people refer to opportunity youth as, and we've all heard this, juvenile delinquents. Dropouts became the popular term in the 1960s and eventually became the prevailing terminology. And then the 80s brought us at-risk youth, a product of the famous government report on the state of education, A Nation at Risk. And then in the 1990s, one of the most painful and damaging terms, monikers, became more commonly used, super predator. That caught on in the media and among politicians. But working with young adults, the White House Council focused on a new narrative that was predicated on the way they saw themselves, their goals, the way they wanted to be positioned in society. In fact, acting on the agency and the desires and the beliefs of young adults themselves. The council also believed that communities using the collective impact approach, and I know this is something that you all think about and talk about. I know that people are smiling when I use that phrase. That approach, supported by the federal government, could reduce the number of opportunity youth nationally. And to help do that, the internationally known Aspen Institute was identified as a home for the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions and the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund, or the OYIF. Now, the OYIF was intended to build strong evidence of success for utilizing the collective impact community collaboration strategy to build and deepen pathways to achieve better outcomes in education and employment for opportunity youth. It was also designed to make the case for increased adoption of collective impact and community collaboration as an effective model for community change, and to put the issue of equity at the center of the work, which requires an intentional narrative change and cultural strategies. The OYIF was launched in 2011 by funding to 21 urban, rural, and tribal communities across the United States. We granted more than $13 million to those communities over a period of years to help them focus on youth outcomes and systems change, provide community backbone institutions with multi-year support, and create so that they could create and strengthen the infrastructure and the capacity necessary to drive a community-wide opportunity youth agenda, to intentionally include young people as partners in the work, something I'll talk about a little bit more in a few minutes, to bring additional financial support to communities, and to facilitate technical assistance, and to build a learning community for the network of communities that were part of the OYIF. So of course, I'm sure you're wondering, well, what did you accomplish? Well, by 2019, the OYIF had supported a network of communities that improved education and employment connections, youth entrepreneurship, and data use. And working with aligned organizations, the number of opportunity youth that had been disconnected from education and the labor market dropped from nearly 6 million to nearly 5 million. Now, the OYIF also shifted its mission to support a national network, the Opportunity Youth Forum, or OYF. It gets confusing, but we shifted from the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund to the Opportunity Youth Forum. And that forum now includes 27 collaboratives across 17 states, each seeking to scale multiple reconnection pathways and achieve better outcomes in education and employment for opportunity youth. So that then raises the question, we're all considering, what does the future hold, promise or peril, for opportunity youth? Now, this is what we've learned. And of course, I'll be curious to know more about what you're learning in the work that you're doing in Canada. Last year, we published a report that was based on an evaluation of work being done in 23 of those 27 communities that I mentioned. Our objective was to take stock of where we were and to use that information to strengthen our approach, to use an iterative approach. I mean, the purpose of collecting data, the purpose of doing evaluation is not so that we can blame ourselves for what's going wrong or necessarily just to cheer what's going right, but it's to use that information so that we can move forward, so that we can be smarter. The evaluation revealed insights into the network's capacities as well as the systems collaboratives are working to change. So first, our system change work is grounded in core values. I mentioned before, equity and youth-led change. In addition to that, community power. And every collaborative is incorporating those values in its structure and processes, as well as its effort to change local systems. Collaboratives are helping stakeholders shift how they understand and discuss racial disparities, and stakeholders are beginning to grasp the challenges that affect opportunity youth, as well as the need to target their strategies accordingly. In other words, you don't just keep casting the net broadly. When you identify specific places where specific work needs to be done, and you have strategies to address those challenges, you target them. Again, it's making us smarter about the way that we approach this work. Collaboratives are also seeking partners who are committed to real change and share the values of diversity and equity. And importantly, and I know we'll have an opportunity to discuss this further soon, youth leaders are also being incorporated into the work, the planning processes, the meetings, the decision-making. There's work to be done, to be sure, but as we're focusing on policy development and funding decisions, we know we have to do that work, and we're learning from the other ways that youth are involved. And collaboratives are taking giant strides in that direction. They're working to progress across a continuum of youth and young adult engagement. And we think about this, as I mentioned, as a continuum, starting with basic engagement, feedback and consultation. Youth are asked to provide discrete feedback and recommendations. Excuse me. That's the place where we know we can begin. But at the same time, we know we need to take the next step, and that's participatory engagement, representation and input into collaborative activities. Young adults have a seat at the table. The next step is influencing programs and systems, advocacy and decision-making and programming. Youth and young adults are working in partnership with professional adults to make key decisions. And then finally, the ultimate goal is that youth and young adults are leading change. They're helping to organize for better outcomes. They're leading the advocacy and programming efforts. Now, we know that collaboratives are focusing on adultism, the belief that adults are smarter and that their voices are more valuable, which creates a power imbalance that undercuts youth engagement. So they're focusing on that challenge as they do their work, because we all need to exercise that muscle. In fact, we have a collaborative in New Orleans, Louisiana, that realized that they weren't fully integrating youth into their work. And as a result, they developed a youth action team that now serves that now serves as a subcommittee of the collaborative. Their work includes monthly leadership development, and youth receive stipends and are involved in their national meetings. In other words, the message to youth is your time is valuable, your opinions matter, we value your work, and we need your input. And in fact, we are taking the message from young adults who tell us nothing about us without us. We have to be included. Don't just slide over a chair and see if we can scooch a new chair up to the table, but we're resetting the table with their voices, their presence, their savvy, their knowledge in the midst of our work. Collaboratives in doing that are also preparing adults to work with youth in a fully integrated fashion, helping them develop their skills and share and control their stories without reliving trauma. There is no instance in which it is okay for young adults to feel as though, they're under glass, they're under a microscope, they're being used in this process. In fact, they have to have agency and feel as though, not just feel as though, it has to be true that they are controlling their stories and their narratives. And that's happening in the healthiest possible way. Now, second, the OIF is also focusing on building capacity in and among collaboratives. That includes the infrastructure and processes necessary to execute the Opportunity Youth Agenda and achieve systems change, which means dismantling the disconnected pathways and inequitable conditions that prevent young adults from achieving their potential. We've learned several things when it comes to capacity building. Now, some aren't surprising, others are less intuitive. One, older collaboratives have greater capacity, not surprising, as do those with better finance backbone organizations, as do those who are located in cities as compared to those who are in rural areas. But among the other trends that we're witnessing, one, a more diverse group of sectoral and organizational leaders are starting to shape and implement the work, though much more needs to be done to bring, for example, employers and community members into this work. Now, the challenge with employers is age old. It is a systems level challenge. And it's one that I've seen in the work we were doing at the White House when I served on the national board of an organization, of another organization, and certainly in our work at the Aspen Institute. But there are things that we can do to support employers who recognize that this work is important. So, for example, we launched a campaign called the Grads of Life campaign through an organization called Year Up with other allies and partners. And we're doing that in a way that targets employers very specifically. The messages are driven to them to say, rethink who you're hiring and why. Do you need someone that has a 4-year degree for this job? Or is that degree inflation? Do you really need someone who has a certification or who has a 2-year degree? Rethink the way that you're thinking about these young people. This goes back to narrative change. As opposed to thinking about them, as I mentioned before, as dropouts, for example, recognize that these are young people who have overcome what for many of us would feel like almost insurmountable hurdles, who are intelligent, who are savvy, who are gritty, who want these opportunities, who have, as I mentioned when I was reading that quote earlier, made the decision to be actively engaged in their communities and civic life, who want these jobs. So in doing that, and in addition, providing supports to employers, as well as to opportunity youth who go into the workforce, so that they're better able to navigate the workforce, so that employers know what kinds of supports are needed for these young people. In doing that, we've seen we've seen better outcomes, and we're starting to see more employers involved in this work. Community collaboratives are also demonstrating strong data capacity in some areas, like communicating their vision and urging stakeholders to the table in their communities. And while we're seeing greater collaboration among stakeholders, offering personnel support and in-kind resources, it's been tough for collaboratives to generate financial commitments. They're finding it hard to raise money for the infrastructure that's necessary to support their good work. Now, when it comes to systems change, we're seeing programmatic changes, partners heightening their focus on opportunity youth needs, establishing internal equity goals, and shifts to improve service delivery. Collaboratives have also laid a great foundation for policy change by building communication with policymakers to influence state and local policy agendas. And in some cases, we've seen those efforts lead to changes in laws and regulations. For example, we have a collaborative in Maine, and this actually happened in one of our convenings where we bring our communities together, the learning community together. And it was a young woman who was sitting at a table, part of a collaborative or delegation from rural Maine. And she was someone who had gone through the foster care system and talked about the challenges and the hurdles imposed by that system that prevented or make it more challenging to go on and get some kind of a post-secondary credential. That led the person who happened to be sitting next to her, someone who was part of the Maine state legislature, to say, you know what, we've got to tackle that issue. She was actively involved, along with other Opportunity Youth, in shaping the legislation that was ultimately passed by the state of Maine that makes it easier for those who are aging out of foster care to go on and receive additional education. As I mentioned, funding changes are, not surprisingly, the most difficult to achieve. We're seeing the ability to leverage public dollars for programmatic shifts. In fact, public funding outpaces private dollars, except for resources for backbone organizations. Those are more likely to get support from private sources. Again, that is an age-old problem. I think it's easier or more intuitive for funders to say, you know what, we want to fund service delivery. We want to fund programmatic work. And that feels in many ways like it's more fulfilling that we're getting something done. But I think for those of us who work on collective impact, we know how essential that capacity building is. We know how essential that backbone organization is. So we also want to see funders align their decisions with the goals and the needs of collaboratives. Now, of course, all of this work has been made more challenging by the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has ushered in unprecedented unemployment among young people, certainly in the United States, and I would imagine so in Canada as well. By this time last year, think about where we were this time last year, nearly 8 million workers under the age of 30 were unemployed in the United States. 3 million dropped out of the workforce in a 1-month period between mid-April and mid-May alone. And African-American and Latinos were hit harder than other racial groups. As young adults who are disproportionately from communities of color, the implications for Opportunity Youth are laid bare as these numbers just continue to rise. The wide-ranging and catastrophic effects of the crisis on both the economy and the education system are reversing progress. Last year, an organization called Measure of America, they are a project of the Social Science Research Council that has studied youth disconnection for nearly a decade, estimated that the number of Opportunity Youth in 2020 could swell to nearly 9 million teens and young adults. And think about it, we were seeing those numbers decline, and as a result of the pandemic, we saw them rise, and we were acknowledging those estimates. I'm still looking for the numbers so that we can get a sense of what really happened in 2020, but we certainly know how dire the circumstances were. The pandemic caused many job training and service programs to shut down. Some of those programs were training young people to be healthcare workers, first responders, and other professionals. Attention turned to shifting training online to tailor it to high-demand jobs and mitigate the effects of young people's likely lack of access to summer and other jobs in a battered economy. Those solutions were a win-win as they work for Opportunity Youth and others. But one of the things that we also know, and we heard this from so many Opportunity Youth, it's like, look, I loved the program that I was in because it was an opportunity for me to connect with people, to do that work in person, to receive the support that I needed, to engage with other young adults who, like me, were working to fulfill my potential. Doing this work online feels disconnected. It feels harder. And I think we certainly have witnessed that, for young people and youth of all ages. But it certainly was a lifeline to help us to continue the training process, to continue education and reconnection for young adults. Now, we were also working to push for better mechanisms to get cash assistance in the hands of young adults and other low-income populations so they could reconnect to school and work. Some Opportunity Youth had trouble receiving stimulus checks from the US government because they found the systems too difficult to navigate. The paperwork was challenging. the required documents too hard to locate. Others missed out because they were experiencing homelessness or because they were claimed by dependent adults who don't actually support them. So what's needed going forward? Well, while the pandemic provides considerable headwinds, I remain optimistic about the future. And you might say, well, Melody, given all that, why are you optimistic about the future? So let me give you a few reasons. First, before the pandemic, as I mentioned, we were witnessing a decrease in the number of opportunity youth. As I described, while much more work remains to be done, our collective strategies are working. The growing movement of and for opportunity youth can drive change. I think we have to take a moment to stop and to acknowledge that. We know what to do. We know how to address this problem. And certainly, as I mentioned before, it's iterative. As we're learning more, as we're seeing, we need to tweak it a little bit more over here. We need to address it over there. We also are able to make progress. Second, policymakers can build on successful, widely supported strategies and program models. And I know we have someone like Minister Chagar, who's deeply, deeply committed to this work, who we need more of her. Let's try and clone her. Maybe that'll be the next thing we can do with science and technology. But I know that there are committed policymakers, both in Canada and the United States. What we have to do is focus on an uptake on the programs that are working. Let's do what works. So for example, federal evaluation found in the United States that a back on track model that we've used doubles the odds that young people will be reconnected to school or work. And there are other good programs that with increased funding and flexibility are also able to help. For example, Youth Build, which operates both in the United States and internationally, and also the National Guard Youth Challenge Program, the National Civilian Community Corps, and the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act's youth activities have all led to positive outcomes. This is encouraging given that nearly 70% of opportunity youth also say they want to serve their communities, but only 3% have the opportunity to do so. So these ideas of service learning and work and service being combined, we know are successful ways to reconnect opportunity youth. Third, we've seen growing private sector investment. Even as the effects of the pandemic took their toll, the OIF identified private sector partners that deepened their commitment to this work. The Ballmer Group and the Conrad Hilton Foundation launched the OIF Rapid Response Fund to provide 18 months of financial support to help opportunity youth secure access to benefits and help collaboratives advocate for youth and young adults in the economic recovery effort. The Ballmer Group also provided resources to build data capacity in rural and tribal communities. JP Morgan Chase helped launch the Scaling Pathways for Opportunity Youth Planning Grants in 11 communities to strengthen capacity to improve secondary, post-secondary, and career outcomes. Those grants specifically focused on regional labor markets, training pathways, and going back to something I said a minute ago, employer engagement. What better way to encourage employers to engage than having a large employer create new allies and say to CEOs and human resources professionals, this works, you can do it, let us show you how, let us help you. With the help of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and the Marguerite Casey Foundation, we expanded our domestic network by adding 7 new networks and helping 2 relaunch their collaboratives. And finally, globally, we added 3 communities in India, Brazil, and South Africa to our Global Opportunity Youth Network. And Prudential has been a lead partner in that work. And finally, as we're hard at work in the United States, I know that you are taking a bold approach here in Canada. Tamarack and the government of Canada are taking on this issue with the same level of passion and commitment and ambition. Your 5-year Communities Building Youth Future strategy, system-wide solution is visionary. leveraging the core tenets of collective impact to build community-driven and national strategies that support young adults, integrating services to build capacity in communities and connect more youth to needed support and resources in their communities, building a national collaborative across 13 diverse communities to engage and leverage the resources needed to do this work. And you're providing resources to catalyze new programs and services through the Community Innovation Fund. I am eager and excited to watch your work unfold and continue. And I believe that we'll be able to learn from you to improve outcomes for opportunity youth in the United States. But let me conclude with why I am most optimistic about the future for young adults, and why I think it's imperative that we fully commit ourselves to ending youth poverty in the United States and in Canada. Several years ago, when I was still working at the White House, I met a young man who told a group of us that he was thrown away. And I mean that literally. As an infant, he was found in the trash. Now, who knows what his mother endured that led her to make that decision? Who knows the immense challenges that she must have been fighting to lead her to make that decision? But the ramifications for that young man were harsh. Challenges in school, drugs, involvement in the juvenile justice system. But ultimately, with the help of supportive adults, great programs, and his own strength, he began to live his potential. Now, too many young people here in the United States and around the world can tell similar stories. And yet their lives don't have to be, shouldn't be, cannot be defined by those stories. We can and must do better with and for those young adults. But our work has to be intentional, and we have to move beyond great programs. As a friend and colleague of mine often says, we are program rich, but system poor. Our work must be the hard work of interrogating and challenging systems that don't work, building across the cleavages and recasting them so they're connected and strong and equity focused. Our youth and young adults aren't disconnected. It's our systems. And the lives and futures of young adults depend on our collective work and our getting it right in partnership with them. In the words of the young adults with and for whom we work, quote, we recognize the need for people of all backgrounds to come together, to work together to create a society in which it is recognized that all people are created equal, where there is liberty and freedom, opportunity, responsibility, justice, and love for all. With young adults with those values, who have made that kind of commitment, who are that intentional, we must chart our course, and failure is not an option. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, both of you, for those comments. That was very deep and profound, Melody. That was really inspiring, especially that story of the thrown away young man. We should hold that story as inspiration and as we go forward in the work that we're doing. And thank you to you, Minister, for your commitment, your words. It's your leadership is really important. There's an awful lot there, Melody, that was very profound, and I can't even begin to summarize it all, but I would like to say two things. One, you started off by talking about Paul Bourne, and Paul told Sean and I the story of his visit to the White House, and he had that twinkle in his eye, that smile of something very special in his life that he remembered with deep passion and appreciation. But you're talking about Richmond, Virginia, and the two neighborhoods. And it reminded me of when I was growing up, and I lived in a community near Hamilton, Ontario, and I used to cycle through Hamilton to go to work in the steel mills in the North End. And I knew I was cycling through a poor neighborhood, but only when they ran the data and did the studies did I learn, and as many else did, the disparities that you were talking about. So I had no idea that I was riding through a community where the quality of life was so different. The life expectancy was so different. And it was really that turned me to the work that led me to work with Paul Bourne in Tamarack. But it's a story that you said you speculate is similar in Canadian cities, and I can assure you it is. And it's the kind of work that you're doing and the inspiration you're bringing is helping all of us to do our work much better. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I would like now to introduce ADM Atik Rahman, who will speak to a photo contest. The photo contest was really a question about youth prosperity and what does it look like. So Atik Rahman is Assistant Deputy Minister of the Learning Branch at Employment and Social Development Canada. That's the famous ESDC. This branch consists of the Canada Education Savings Program, the Canada Student Loans Program, the Support for Student Learning Program, and the Canada Services Corp. Through these programs, the Government of Canada provides youth and students with financial and non-financial support to pursue post-secondary education and service opportunities. It's also with this ADM and this branch that Tamarack works on the Youth Futures program, which you so generously affirmed as an inspiration, a visionary piece of work. And we all look forward to seeing that work through to its completion and to the improvement of the youth. So now I would like to invite Atik Rahman to speak to you. Atik?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Atik Rahman. Yes, I am the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Learning Branch at Employment and Social Development Canada. I would first like to take a moment to acknowledge that I am joining you from the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. I know many of you are joining from all over Canada, many different places in the country, and I would invite you all to take a moment to reflect and acknowledge the original stewards of the land that you are on. I would also like to thank Liz Weaver and Paul Bourne from the Tamarack Institute for providing this opportunity for all of us to come together again this year. I also thank each and every one of you for joining us today and for your commitment to supporting youth. Before we move to the youth photo exhibit, which I'm sure you are all waiting for, I'd just like to say a couple of words about our relationship with Tamarack and on the government's commitment to youth. We are certainly very proud to support Tamarack's community's Building Youth Futures Collective Impact project. We know that Tamarack is an organization with proven results on community and youth engagement. This project, which launched in 2019, will mentor and support 13 communities across Canada to develop collaborative solutions to help young Canadians. The project has potential for positive impacts on community and youth resilience, in particular for youth most at risk of dropping out of high school. These youth really need access to resources, services, and above all, the support of people like those of you who are here today, so that you can help them graduate from high school and transition to post-secondary education or employment. And as you know, the stakes have never been as high as it is today, as the COVID-19 pandemic has hit the youth population really, really hard. The good news is that the government recognizes these challenges, and in the recent budget released a couple of weeks ago, the government has announced $5.7 billion to support new opportunities for youth. This includes significant commitment for student financial aid, student grants, student loans, but also new job and training opportunities for youth. And what would be noteworthy to many of you here is the renewed commitment in Budget 2021 to the Support for Student Learning Program. This will expand federal investments in after-school programming to support organizations who work to ensure that youth facing barriers can graduate high school and do not fall further behind as a result of the pandemic. Finally, I would just say that it is so impressive to see all of you here together and continue this important work despite the incredible challenges this past year has brought. Together, we need to keep working towards supporting youth in succeeding in their educational journey. So let us continue pushing forward, sharing best practices, making sure that youth voices are heard, and with open communications that will help build the best and the most promising futures for youth across Canada. Now, let us turn our attention to this year's photo exhibit. The exhibit called for original photos that explore the idea of prosperity and a future where young people in Canada thrive. I understand that the exhibit had 122 entries by 30 youth. I hope you are all as excited for this as I am for this viewing. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Rana Nematullah, who will tell us all about the winners.
Welcome back. Thank you so much. What a morning. I am so inspired. Melody Barnes, the extent to which I took notes through that session and just, I have so many questions. And Minister Chagger, I am so glad that we get to hear from both of you in the upcoming panel as well. So we get to keep going on this theme. And I want to also say a big thanks to Atik and to all of the youth who sent in those photos. Thank you so much. Now I promised you we would do some stretching. And if I'm going to do it, I'm hoping all of you will do this at home too. So let's just get our arms going up, go up. Yeah, let's get it going. Oh, yes. And then let's just circle those shoulders. Yes. Oh, it's hard to be in these stretches backwards a little bit. If you feel like you can pull that elbow up, yeah, that feel good. Good. And then the other one, yeah. And then I'm going to just rock that head a little bit. Yes. Oh, I can feel that. Now, those of us on the West Coast who've had to get up early will know that we've been able to go hiking a little bit. I went out for my first kayak the other day. My elbows are a little bit sore. I have my first kayak blisters. It feels good. So I have those of you who are able to get out as we're going through this incredible time, that you're able to get out and take care of yourselves in this time, even if it's a walk around or just stretching your legs or getting up and taking a break. And as you take breaks, go check out House Space as well to get some ideas around some of the different kinds of ways of doing mindfulness training, build your capacity to just get out of all of the intensity of the time that we're in. I'm really, really excited about this next part of our agenda. And I'm thrilled that we are going to focus in and really talk to youth that have been involved in the work that Tamarack has been leading. And I think who better to take us through that than the Tamarack Director of Communities Building Youth Futures, Nathalie Blanchet. Nathalie has extensive experience working across organizations with stakeholders and communities to help create systems change. With a background in adult education, she helps facilitate trust building and collaboration that pays particular attention to the issues of diversity and the needs of communities. In her role at Tamarack, Nathalie works closely with the managers of cities and with staff across the Institute to ensure communities have the knowledge and learning and coaching they need to design mechanisms for youth to be engaged and supported. So I'd like you to welcome our panel moderator, Nathalie Blanchet, who will introduce our other panelists. Over to you, Nathalie. Nathalie, it's one of those times when we always have to be at the muting. I'll be doing that all day. Unmute, we all do it. It's part of the Zoom world. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that tip and also for that introduction, Shauna. So good afternoon, everyone. And it's so great to see all of you here during the plenary. And before I get started, I wanted to say I'm from the unceded territory of Mi'kmaq. And as part of the team working on Communities Building Youth Futures initiative, I'm so pleased to be moderating this panel today after this keynote and after the beginning of this event today. So the initiative, the CBYF, Communities Building Youth Futures, this initiative in many ways was inspired by the Opportunity Youth work that Ms. Barnes spearheaded. So the keynote really resonated with many components of our CBYF work. And the panel discussion today will be touching on prosperity, on futures, on ending youth poverty. And for that conversation, we're really pleased that we've assembled a panel of leaders that we draw inspiration from. Our first panelist, Melody Barnes, you've been introduced. Melody, to me, is a pioneer in creating strong collective action directly with communities to create those opportunities for youth right now, and doing this while making an impact on social policies. Minister Chagger, a strong champion for youth, not only by virtue of her role, but in terms of her practice and engaging with and intentionally listening to youth. Alex Powalinski. Alex is a program project coordinator for Communities Building Youth Futures, or CBYF, in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And Alex is creating a very thoughtful and holistic approach to engaging and responding to youth needs. Also, we're joined here by Brandon Montour. Brandon is a McGill Law student, and as of last week, he entered his second year of law. And he's early on in his career, but he's committed to systems change. Ana Gonzalez Guerrero. Ana is the managing director of the Youth Climate Lab, a board member for Tamarack Institute, and over the past year has really been creating some strong connections for us and the CBYF work. So let's start the conversation. So Alex, you studied Indigenous social work and reconciliation studies. Now you are the project coordinator for CBYF in Prince Albert. And I've gotten to know you over the past several months, and I'm really interested in following the work that you do with holistic youth engagement. So from the perspective of someone who's passionate about building brighter futures for youth in your community, what does prosperity mean in a youth context? How can we make prosperity more meaningful for youth?
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I wanted to start by acknowledging and expressing my gratitude to the many youth who shared their voices with me that have enabled me to be here today. And I wanted to give a shout out to the youth who participated in focus group discussions to help inform my presentation today. So that's a shout out to Talon, Cody, Ananda, Katie, Juliana, and Tiffany, who are all watching today. So thank you guys so much. And again, to all the youth who've answered our survey as well. So my role here today is to amplify that youth voice and to share with you what I've learned from working with these youth. We've surveyed approximately 140 youth in our community of Prince Albert. The survey covered youth goals, barriers, strengths, and areas of interest. When asked about what a successful or prosperous life would look like in the next 5 years, themes of education, meaningful careers, and healthy, stable relationships emerged as prominent priorities for our youth. These themes also emerged in our focus group discussions. So I asked the youth, what makes up the good life, or Mio Pimatiswan, as we call it in Cree, one of the Indigenous languages in Treaty 6 territory. What I found really interesting was how little emphasis the youth placed on wealth and material acquisition. The youth did acknowledge that financial stability is important in having a good and prosperous life. But when asked to expand on financial success, youth shared that they would feel prosperous just knowing that they don't have to worry about their next bill and having enough money to do the things that they love and to share it with people that they love. My conversations with the youth and reviewing the survey responses had me thinking of that old saying, we should work to live, not live to work. When it came to talking about careers and jobs, the youth not only identified a good paying job as a factor of prosperity, but what they found more important was one that they found fulfilling and where they felt valued. Many youth shared that feeling accomplished, happy, and like they've made a difference is how they would measure their prosperity and success. So prosperity, according to the youth, also meant being healthy and balanced in all 4 aspects of the self, including their mental selves, emotional, spiritual, and physical. They also identified that they need to have the chance to build an awareness and understanding of how to maintain that balance. The most common barriers to success and prosperity that our youth identified were mental health, low self-esteem, and a lack of identity. Our youth state that supportive, stable relationships are the essential factors to developing prosperity. The youth focused heavily on the theme of relationships throughout our discussions of prosperity and Mio Pimatiswan. The youth stressed that relationships are what make prosperity meaningful. One youth said, you can have money and success, but you can't appreciate it if you have nobody to share it with. Another youth shared that you need to have friends and family to share your prosperity with, otherwise it means nothing. One youth said she will consider herself prosperous when she has seen her dreams become a reality, when she's able to live out her passions and has people around her to share that with. As I mentioned before, the goals for financial success were humble, with one youth sharing that she will feel successful when she doesn't have to live paycheck to paycheck or worry about bills, when she has a job that allows her to maintain a balance between her personal and professional lives, which will enable her to spend time with family and friends and maintain and foster those important supportive relationships. When asked how they would feel once they reached that level of prosperity, the youth said that they should feel balanced, happy, and accomplished. One youth said she wants to feel grateful and have the opportunity to share her prosperity with others. In summary, prosperity in the youth context, I learned, had little to do with money and more to do with being included, feeling connected and valued, finding a sense of fulfillment, relationships, having opportunity, and being able to find and maintain balance within themselves and in their lives. Many of our youth have shared that they feel excluded from prosperity. They don't see themselves reflected in the version of prosperity or success that we typically see. The best way to make prosperity meaningful for our youth is to listen to their voice and allow them and support them to discover and define and pursue their own version of prosperity. Thank you.
Alex, thank you very much. Your commitment to sharing youth voice is fantastic. And so thank you for taking the time to do that and to share that with us today. Brandon, the next question is for you. And so you live in Ganawage, a First Nations reserve south of Montreal, and you've studied political science and now pursuing a law degree at McGill University. You've worked with us at Tamarack last summer as a youth intern, and now you're the co-chair of our CBYF National Collective. And I know you're a strong advocate for systems change and for addressing the challenges faced by Indigenous people across Canada. And so the question I had for you, in your opinion, how does addressing youth poverty and creating opportunities for youth, how does that impact prosperity in communities?
Thank you, Natalie. Segu Samagwegu, Wakonoradu, Desideranyu Yujats. My name is Desideranyu Brandon Montour, and as Natalie said, I'm from Ganawage, Quebec. And thank you, Natalie, for that question. I think it's important, and I think that's one of the reasons why many of us are here today. Is to address this challenge that we as a country are currently facing, and also for Indigenous peoples. As an Indigenous person myself, living on a small reserve, the issue of youth poverty touches very close to home. In fact, it's one of my motives that led me to science and then law school now at McGill. My goal is to be a driving force of that change and encourage others to join me. The reason for this is, because the reality that we're currently facing is truly disheartening. Indigenous peoples in Canada experience the highest levels of poverty. 1 in 4 of us live in poverty currently, and among Indigenous youth under 18, 4 of 10 of us live in poverty, according to the Canadian Poverty Institute. And through my work that I've been doing over the past few years, whether it be practical hands-on experience or through academia, a common theme across many communities is the lack of employment opportunities for youth. I believe that creating meaningful opportunities for youth that allow them to develop their skills and interests is linked to community prosperity. In this, youth need to be made aware of these opportunities. These opportunities and resources are often present, but youth who need them the most are often not aware of them. With so many of us gathered here today, I trust that we will acknowledge this gap and seek to do whatever we can in our individual communities to address these issues. In my community of Ganawage, for example, we tackled this issue through an initiative called the KSSEP, the Ganawage Student Summer Employment Program, which I had the privilege of benefiting from, as well as many other youth in my community. Through this program, we're seeing a number of increasing amount of youth joining key organizations within our community, such as Ganawage Community Services, the Mohawk Council of Ganawage, and our local hospital. From my personal experience, I witnessed firsthand how these opportunities cultivate critical skills in leaders of tomorrow and how greatly my community has benefited from it. Unfortunately, many communities have not had this privilege and continue to struggle with these issues, which is why we're all here today, because we care, because we recognize that change needs to happen, and because we want to be a part of that change. Obviously, we're not going to solve this issue here today, but this conversation we're having together will hopefully be continued beyond the next 2 days so that we can continue to voice our concerns and brainstorm how we can ensure that our communities and futures are possible. I don't think change is possible, but I know it is. And over the next 2 days, I'm happy to continue this conversation and speak with many of you as we continue to address these critical issues.
Thank you, Brandon, for your insights and your commitment. And it's been a real pleasure getting to know you over this last year, and ever grateful that you're part of our national collaborative. Anna, the next question is for you. Anna, you've been working on climate change for over 15 years, and you co-founded and now are the managing director at the Youth Climate Lab. You're dedicated to creating innovative projects for ambitious climate action. And with your focus on sustainable local development and the empowerment of various actors, such as young people, from your perspective, what needs to happen to empower youth to be leaders in community change and to end youth poverty?
Thank you, Natalie and Brandon and Alex. Maybe before answering my question, I just wanted to note something that I find very interesting from Alex's point around how young people are perceiving prosperity. And I think it's worth reassessing our understanding of prosperity that has been based on wealth, that has been based in many cases in colonial and white supremacy points of views that just value that capitalist approach. And the way that we need to remain within the kind of ecological constraints that we have, that type of prosperity and that type of like never-ending economic growth is simply unsustainable and unattainable. So for young people to also have this in mind and consider how to reframe prosperity in a way that's both sustainable for our ecology, for our world, and for their own relationships and kind of well-being, I think it's pivotal in this kind of change of tone in the conversation around prosperity and growth. Now I'll answer my question. But I think a lot of, at the very core, has already been named and mentioned both by Melody Barnes and Minister Chagger. But to me, it's about skills building, access to opportunities to grow and develop into leaders today, not just the leaders of tomorrow. And this does look like meaningful careers that Alex named, but also being really aware of the systemic barriers that Brandon mentioned and how even if these opportunities exist, who are they being offered to? The second one is meaningful inclusion in decision-making spaces. So access and understanding to policy at all levels. And then the third one that I wanted to name is financing directed to youth-led and not just youth-focused solutions, which, spoiler alert, those are the three key shifts that Youth Climate Lab focuses on: skills, policy, and financing, to really tackle in a way that's uniquely positioned to address climate change. But I think these shifts are pretty transferable to a lot of what we're talking about. That said, given the really fantastic remarks and panelists that we have today, I want to challenge us to think a little bit beyond what needs to happen and what is needed to get started almost, and start talking about what happens when those things are actually in place. Almost skip to the now what. And to me, we cannot have that conversation without discussing sharing spaces and sharing power. So what I mean by that is that unless folks in positions of power right now, call it funders, governments, decision makers of any sorts, are actually willing to share those spaces in ways that are safe and inclusive, and share power in ways that are co-creating or delegating, fully shifting the power, then we will continue to find ourselves with very siloed youth contributions. Like, we're sent to the kids' table. Everyone is excited. There's a kids' table. They're there. I think Melody also mentioned like maybe squeezing into a chair in the big table. But how are those contributions actually being considered, intertwined, and implemented in ways that are meaningful? So I'll use the question that was asked for me to maybe expand on that a little bit further. But what needs to happen to empower youth to be leaders the wording in itself assumed that there is some power to be given, or at least power to be shared with young people, right? And I won't get into the whole young people are already powerful, because we are. I think we're talking about very traditional, again, colonial and rooted in white supremacy ways of seeing power. But let's just say, for the sake of this conversation, folks hold power, and this is a very pivotal time in history to make use of that power to really get us out of poverty and climate change. So I think, in my experience, that's when it gets tricky, right? It's easy to agree that more young people should be included, or that youth voices are important as catalysts in community. It's a whole other ballgame to give youth the ability to take charge and run with it. So without getting too derailed, I think we have the skills. Young people have ideas and solutions. We have lived experiences, and we have more at stake than anyone else. And yeah, we oftentimes don't have the resources, financial and non-financial. It was described earlier as wealth of all sorts. And we don't have that traditional power at this pivotal time. But what we do have is a lot of willingness to work together meaningfully, grounded in trust and respect, and in ways that allows us to truly collaborate intergenerationally. So my call to anyone listening is, if you're in a position of power and you're unwilling to use that to make bold commitments, but more importantly, take action, then don't keep that power, pass it on, and let others step up to the call. If you're in a position of power and you're like, put me in, coach, I want to share, then ask yourself how within your capacity you're actually allowing for more collaborative and ambitious transformative solutions with young people, not just for them. So young people, I think it was mentioned as young people as partners in the work by Melody Barnes. And then lastly, if you're young and tired, like I sometimes am, call it out. Get more friends, build those relationships that Alex was pointing out. This work is not meant to be done alone, and it really relies on us, relying on communities. My co-founder often says, let's make it impossible for other people to ignore youth. So yeah, make it impossible to be ignored. There is just one last prompt. Our Youth Climate Lab has an infiltration manual, and chapter 4, it demystifies local governments. Chapter 4 talks about knowing your worth and knowing how to take care of yourself, which is something that I see, unfortunately, very often as the first thing that goes out of the window in the climate and social movements. So for young people that may be listening, take a look at that. It's on our website, and it was informed by a lot of young people in this space.
Wow, thank you, Anna. I didn't mention this earlier, but Anna is also part of our CDYF National Collaborative, and I don't know if you know this, but you often throw in these kernels of wisdom or call to action, and that's really been helpful for us as we're starting this CDYF initiative. So thank you. And next, Minister Jagger. Minister, as a champion for youth and someone who's been engaging with youth on topics such as youth mental health over the last couple of years, when you hear the points highlighted by Alex, Anna, and Brandon, how are these comments important in the work that you do? And also, what kind of multi-sector partnerships would you leverage in order to act on some of the things that we've heard?
Thank you, Natalie. And I just want to say this is a tremendous morning. And I really like opportunities like this, and not because we get to have, an opportunity to come together. That's great. But just because you're pushing, right? And you're doing exactly what we need Canadians, including young Canadians, to do. I was also typing to make sure I stay within our schedule to respect the organizers and so forth. So I'm just going to say to Alex, in Canada, diversity is our strength, and it is definitely more than the shells that we occupy. So the diversity of perspectives, of regions, of languages, of experiences, of realities, and the list goes on, that is the challenge, and it's what we're trying to bring to the forefront. And when I became the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth, it was exactly to spur the broadening of what diversity means, including intersectionalities. And it is an area that we're actually getting into, but I want to work with you to push it even more. There is an appetite for it. And you know what? I'll tell you, youth voices are leading the charge. You are, accepting and open by default. And as we get older, we tend to create these barriers around us. So if I have any advice to the young people listening, don't do exactly what the generations before you did. Don't create those barriers. Continue pushing, continue remembering that when you leave the ladder down, you will succeed when others are succeeding. You don't have to push people down for you to succeed. And I think it's an amazing approach that young people have. So I really appreciate your comments. Brandon, you are a driving force for better outcomes, and I join you. So I take your invitation to say I am here, and I'm taking your advice right now and plugging the Canada Summer Jobs Program. Over 120,000 jobs posted, meaningful employment opportunities, which actually will look at the COVID reality and the public health guidelines and so forth being launched. Well, it was launched last week, jobbank.gc.ca. And I acknowledge that there are communities who are not connected or do not have access to reliable broadband. The Minister of Women and Gender Equality Canada and Rural Economic Development, Mary Monsef, is mandated with this, and she's committed to making sure it happens and comes from a rural community. So it's personal for her, but it is something that we're going to do. Anna, we're listening. And not only listening, I hear you. And there is a nuance between hearing and listening and so forth. And I know that difference as a young person involved in politics well before I could vote. And the impacts of COVID-19 have highlighted gaps in our social systems and have spurred innovative ideas about ways to build back even better and consciously inclusive. The federal government has accepted your challenge and examined social innovation and social financing commitments. And just the comments about wealth, yes. You know, it's not just about your bottom line. It's really about how do we invest better? How do we actually have better health outcomes and so forth? Because we can actually better utilize the funding we have. To the second question, yes, our government supports the deliberate collaboration amongst various stakeholder groups, whether that's government, civil society, private sector, and all sectors, including health, environment, and so forth, to jointly achieve better outcomes. We're taking a whole of government approach, and I'll give a shout out to the Minister of Families, Children, and Social Development, Ahmed Hussein, as well as the Minister of Employment, Workforce, and Disability Inclusion, Carla Qualtero, and their teams at Employment and Social Development Canada for the strategic investments to build better futures and consciously include segments of society that have far too often been left on the sidelines. They have to be able to contribute in meaningful ways. And so when I think about multi-sector partnerships, I think about opportunities like this conference. So we're doing it, but we need to do more of it. And I just want to say quickly, I know my time's running out. As a woman in science, I know that we can't know what we don't measure. So in Canada, we continue to work to implement Canada's first ever youth policy commitment. And it is a policy that was created by youth for the government of Canada to deliver for youth. So you know what we need to do. And we're asking you, we brought you to the table and we continue to engage. It wasn't one opportunity and done. And I can say that because we're going to release the State of the Youth report this year. And to model youth inclusion, ensuring that 75% of Crown corporations have youth representatives on their boards and equal in seat at the table. The PM was the first Minister of Youth in Canada since Confederation, and we've got the Prime Minister's Youth Council, and we work with youth councils across the country. And I just want to say, in regards to the youth employment and skills strategy, over 215,000 new training and work opportunities, including through apprenticeship. Justice Canada, this is an area I've been working on, so I have to share really quickly, is, in the budget, almost $7 million over 5 years to improve collection and use of disaggregated data to address overrepresentation of Indigenous and racialized groups in the justice system. And because mental health is real, over $100 million for innovative mental health interventions for populations disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, including healthcare workers, frontline workers, youth, seniors, Indigenous peoples, and racialized and Black Canadians. The list goes on. This is our time. So these are measures, but we need your voices to implement them in meaningful ways so that they actually do what you want us to do. I'm working with you and I need you more than ever. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jagger, for your comments, your commitments, and your enthusiasm for action. Thank you. Ms. Barnes, as someone who has spearheaded large-scale change for youth, and with youth, with what has been discussed so far, do you see any parallels to your work? And what have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned that we could benefit from? And to reframe that second question, if you were here and you had someone speak to you right after year one, what do you wish they would have said about the work that you're doing with Opportunity Youth?
Great, wonderful question. And first of all, I want to thank everyone on the panel for sharing their perspectives and their experiences. And I'm smiling because this goes to the first question you asked me about parallels. And there are so many. As a friend of mine often says, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. I mean, we may not have exact mirror experiences. In some cases we do, but also just because of the differences in our systems, there are differences, but I see the rhyming, I hear the rhyming. So for example, Brandon talked about access. And that is a significant issue. I mean, one of the things I touched on in my remarks, access during the pandemic for young adults who were trying to get benefits that were due to them, they should have had, but literally just being able to get access to them. And we saw all kinds of challenges there, from knowing what was available to literally being able to navigate certain systems to be able to get to them. Alex talked about, and we've touched on, that expansive view of prosperity. And I know from the young adults that we work with in our collaborative and our network, that's something that they talk about quite often. Every individual, it isn't just, young adults versus, let's just call us with older, grayer hair. But everyone has a sense of how they would like to live their life, what they would consider to be a rich and fulfilling life. For some people, it might be being an entrepreneur. For some people, it might be community organizing. For others, hopefully, it might be government service. The list goes on. But in doing that and talking to young people about those opportunities, we've heard consistently, look, I don't necessarily want to go into the private sector, while others have said, that's something that's of real interest to me. Our objective is to find ways that we are giving people the opportunity to live the lives that they want to live. And as I also said, to define, and I use the term wealth, you all were talking about prosperity, but using that term and expanding it. So not just thinking about it in a very narrow way. So for example, when I think about it, I think about an expansive view of community benefits, access to parks, to even have parks, and certain facilities and certain community-wide based assets that are available to individual. I think about that in terms of the social. I think it was Anna who was talking about the relationships that are important. So I build all of that into a much, much broader definition, and one that isn't simply based on how much money do you have? What does your bank account look like? But thinking much more broadly about having a full and happy life. And I think about the common good. How do we act in a way that supports a virtuous circle, so that not only are all of us who are here now able to have access to that which will allow us to live and fulfill our potential, but those who aren't here yet. How do we build a world that does that? Anna's work made me think about a panel that I just moderated last week with an organization called Fresh Tracks. And it was an organization that was built out of some of the work that we were doing in the White House, but with a keen focus on the environment, and not just for individuals who want to make a life or a career working on environmental or climate focused issues, but thinking about the way that work and service in furtherance of the climate and furtherance of the environment helps to build certain skills brings people together who otherwise may not have worked together. I mean, there are a whole host of things that happen with and for young adults who are engaging in that space. So all of those things came to mind for me. I also, Bardish, Minister Chagar, was talking about listening. And one of the things that I think is so important is distinguishing between listening and waiting to talk. Waiting to talk means that you're not listening, that you're not hearing. It means that you're just waiting for that opening and that silence where you can say what you want to say, as opposed to stepping back and listening carefully. And I think that that is one of the things that muscle that has to be developed as we reset tables with young adults, as opposed to, as so many of us have talked about, saying, oh, well, if you pull your chair up, we'll include you too. Or doing that in a way that is really just tokenism. It's like, well, we've got one young person here, so we're good. Which is, I'm chuckling, I think about that in lots of work that I do and encouraging lots of people to try and think about that differently. So then that goes to the question you asked, well, what would you have thought about, or what do you wish you had known when you first started the work? And I'll say one of the things, even working with a collective impact, multi-sectoral strategy and all the elements that are part of collective impact that are so important, one of the things that we have done since we kicked off that work, and we've encouraged others, allies, and partners to do, is to put equity at the center of that work. That that can't be an add-on. That has to be something that we all focus on, because it reshapes the way that we do our work. It defines how we set that table. It defines the importance that we place on all the voices that are heard, the recommendations that we make, how funders fund, how employers go about employing. I mean, the list goes on and on when you really bake that into the work from the beginning. I'm proud to say that we've done that over time, but that isn't where we started on day one. We've built it in, and we have encouraged others to do that work. And I'm also proud to say people have come back to us and say, you know what? That's now reshaping the way that we hire, the way that we think about and talk about our work. So that's certainly one thing that I consider to be very, very important. Well, I'll stop there. I know that there's lots more to be discussed.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those reminders and thoughts and linking us to the work and the lessons learned that you've had. So thank you. The next question I have for the whole panel is really, it's a question that I want to ask just to get to know you and your work a little bit better. And so the question is, would you share with us the reason why you do the work you do? And not only why you do the work that you do, but how does it connect to this topic of youth prosperity? And I'm going to open the floor to whoever wants to jump in first, but if that doesn't work, I'll try another approach.
Sure, thanks, Natalie. So as a two-spirit gay person of mixed heritage, I grew up with a very disjointed identity. I grew up with a lot of support, and I was very privileged in that regard. I had strong supportive family and friends. And I'm very grateful for those relationships, because that's what brought me back to the path that I'm on today. Allowing me to find a sense of belonging and acceptance outside of myself, which led me to my own self-acceptance. Because of this disjointed identity, I struggled for a few years as I was transitioning into adulthood, and I strayed from my path and went down a road that I wasn't happy with. But once I was able to find that belonging within the community, I was able to accept who I was and discover the path that I was supposed to take. So finding that sense of acceptance, that was really the turning point for me. I went back to school. I started working in the helping profession in youth care work. I was a youth care worker and then an educational assistant. And that was not that long ago, only 7 years ago, when I finally accepted who I was and decided to pursue my passions. So I know the impact of finding that sense of belonging and that affirmation and what role that can play in a youth and a young person being able to live out their full potential. So I know that importance of a supportive community and those supportive relationships. Once I came into my identity, I became committed to being able to support other youth, discovering who they are, loving themselves, and discovering the gifts that they have to share with the community.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Natalie and Alex. I'll go next. That's a great question, Natalie. And speaking for myself, one of the main reasons why I do this work, I would say, is because I want my community, and all communities for that matter, to succeed. As an Indigenous person living on a small reserve, seeing Indigenous youth facing different realities and unequal access to essential resources has really ignited a passion inside of me to change this. And I have devoted my entire academic career to this thus far, and I surely don't plan on stopping soon. I want to champion the voices of all First Nations peoples and represent our voices at the highest level of government and influence change through policy, leadership, and dialogue like we're doing here today. Obviously, the greatest challenge to this is, as Minister Chagger would know, it's not a one-person job. We're all here, and we all need to make a sustained collective effort to ensure that the reality will be different than what we are currently facing today. And seeing everyone here today, I'm confident that we're on the right track for a more prosperous future. And I guess my message would be to, let's please continue this conversation, whether that be on social media, through Twitter, or in our communities or our daily work, because, I've seen in my community how this conversation has ignited.
Thank you, Brandon. Oh, I
Do we
see
just want to, do we want to keep going in order? This feels like a very Canadian cue, just following the initial one. But why do this work? I think this work for me is climate in ways that are intersectional and just aware of all the nuances that come around it. And to me, maybe a short story, I started doing climate work when I was about 12, 13, and Hurricane Vilma hit Cancun, which is where I grew up, Cancun, Mexico. And I think it started as me becoming aware of climate and the changes in my environment from a selfish and very privileged point of view, because the volleyball court that I used to play volleyball at disappeared after the hurricane. And I was like, whoa, what do you mean I can't play volleyball anymore? This is where I used to come. And then I started looking into it, and I was like, okay, hold your horses. Your problem is pretty minimal. There's a lot of communities in Cancun that don't have access to water or sanitation or electricity after the hurricane. And it's been weeks, if not months after it happened. So that was the first exposure I had to climate change, me becoming aware of climate as an issue, and then very quickly realizing that equity and just the differences between how people suffered through it were very present. And I think that was my wake-up call to really center, and it was mentioned earlier by Melody, but center equity and not just as an afterthought. So ever since then, I think, and more so since then, it's just impossible to not care, at least for me, about climate issues and the way that it's going to continue to impact those that contributed to it the least, and how, unless everyone is doing something, we're just not going to get out of it. And that sounds very depressing and very challenging when it comes to climate issues. But I think I often range, and we did a bit of a campaign on this at Youth Climate Lab, between overwhelm, optimistic, and outrage, right? And I think I'm consistently navigating between some of those three, and that's why I keep doing the work, because one day I'm feeling optimistic, then I have to. And then if the next day I'm feeling outraged, then that's even more motivation to really step up our game and make sure that, that the next generation doesn't have to know the world at an ecological risk as the default. And I think this is the point in time where we need to be changing that. So that was a longer story than I thought, but maybe I'll pass it on.
I think it was a good story, and so I appreciate you sharing it. And it actually is, it takes me back to like my younger days, even though I still consider myself young and hip, but others might disagree. The jury is still out, and everyone can have their own opinion on that. But just to answer the question, I would say I do this work because I owe it to my grandfather, who came to Canada and had to go against his faith teachings and cut his hair to get a job in Canada. I do it because I need to use the privilege that I have to dismantle the systems that were built to leave certain segments behind. And maybe I wasn't supposed to be here, but I am here, and it must be for a reason or a lot of reasons. So I do it because I know we can do better, and we can be conscious about how we build and who we include and who we choose not to include. And I sometimes think that adults forget they were youth once. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau always reminds us to never forget why we ran, why we are here, and where we come from. And I fought for same-sex marriages well before the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that it was a charter right. And it wasn't the coolest thing to do, and it was uncomfortable conversations, but it was in my early teen days that I became very comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations and understanding the importance of respectful dialogue, and that we don't have to agree, but we can push each other to bring policies to a better spot. So my vision is to continue to work hard to ensure that every Canadian has a fair chance at success using the tools like the Canada Child Benefit. And to Melody's point, this program is about equity over equality. It was about giving a hand up to people who needed it most by not giving it to the wealthiest 1% of Canada. Since 2015, over 1.3 million Canadians have lifted themselves out of poverty because of this program. And we know that COVID-19 has affected all Canadians in disproportionately certain segments, and we have to continue to work to overcome the impacts of the pandemic, which have exposed and amplified the systemic roots of poverty in Canada. So through Canada's first ever national poverty reduction strategy, we are making significant progress towards meeting our goal of reducing poverty by 50% by 2030. And I'm really encouraged by events like this that share new measures that can end poverty in Canada, the US, and around the world. So please keep this conversation going. You can find me on social media. You can email me. We still have a fax. I take phone calls any which way. And you know what? I believe in snail mail too. I still write cards to people and so forth. So however you want to engage, we want to engage with you as well, because this government is the government that consults, because we know that our best natural renewable resource is our people. It's all of you. So thank you for all you do, and thank you so much for having me here today.
So I will close out this question. And Bardish, I will tell you, I think that you're young and hip. Now, I turned 57 last week, so maybe that isn't helpful, but I think you're young and hip. So how do I come to this work? A couple of things. One, I mentioned to you all that I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and I was born in 1964. So in the US, that was the year that the Civil Rights Act was passed into law. That was the year before the Voting Rights Act became law. And I think about how dramatically my life was changed because of the movements that led to that kind of policy change. When I look at my parents, my mother had gone to college, which was unusual, particularly for an African-American woman in that period. My father had not. He went to college when I was a little girl. I went to my father's college graduation, which I still remember. And I think about all the things that they did to try and give me opportunity. And the older that I got and have gotten, the more it has become clear to me. And I think, Mr. Carlton, you referred to it earlier, that those opportunities don't exist. And in some cases, it is because of zip code. It is the random of the zip code that you were born into. For other individuals, there are family circumstances, there's discrimination. I mean, there are all kinds of downward pressures that undermine opportunity. But what I have always felt very passionately about is being able to put myself in a place where I could fight for other people who can't be in those rooms to have those opportunities, and to also simultaneously empower communities and individuals who aren't in those rooms so that they can create the circumstances for their lives and for their families that they want. And what I think we have to realize is that typically at the forefront of all of those movements are young people. They're young people. And one of my favorite stories, and I will conclude with it, is about a young woman who grew up in Prince Edward County, Virginia, which isn't terribly far from Richmond. And when she was 16 years old, she led the walkout in her school, her high school. They tricked the teachers, they tricked the principal, had a conference, an assembly, and the students walked out and they went on strike for better opportunities and better conditions for their school. Now, what they were fighting for at that moment was a school that was separate but equal. In turn, they ended up having conversation with Oliver Hill and Spotswood Robinson, two very famous civil rights lawyers in the 1950s, who said, we will help you and we will support you, but your fight has to be for not separate but equal, but has to be for equality. And that young woman, Barbara John, helped create the circumstances that led to a case involving Prince Edward County, Virginia, that was rolled into the famous case Brown versus Board of Education, that led to the end of the legality for segregated schools in the United States. She was 16 years old. She was 16 years old. And there's story after story after story like that. So for me, if our story is one of the expansion of freedom, the expansion of opportunity, has to be realized that young people consistently are at the front of those movements, at the leading, the telling of those stories, creating those stories. And so for me, for someone whose life has benefited from that kind of expansion, it can only be that I would work to help create greater opportunities, working with and for young adults, so that we can continue to expand freedom and opportunity, not just in the United States, but around the world.
Oh, thank you. And thank you to each and every one of the panelists for sharing the answer to all the questions. But I'm struck at how your responses to the last question has really helped us understand, your path and why you're doing this work. And so I want to thank each and every one of you. We wanted to talk about youth prosperity. We wanted to talk about building youth futures and ending youth poverty. And I think we've covered a lot of great topics. I'm looking at, a bit of a mind map that I did here around grounding in youth voice, looking at our definitions, changing our narratives, broadening our definition of prosperity, creating action, creating opportunities so that, I love that, creating opportunities so that youth live the lives they want to live, and then centering and at the very beginning, looking at equity and equity within the work. So I want to thank you again, and to all of you who are participating in the plenary and these 3 days. I wish you a wonderful and hopefully as rich conversations as this one. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that deeply thoughtful panel. This has been just a spectacular morning, and you've just really shared some really insightful and important comments for us. at a very personal level, I listened to this, and you can look at me. I'm an old white guy in a sense. Melody, you said you were 57. I'm 67, just a few days ago. And I have come to realize how much I have benefited from the structural privilege and white privilege and structural power that has been afforded me because of who I am. And part of my job in retirement is to help others like me to learn and to be aware and awakened, and to be an ally wherever it makes sense for me to be an ally for others. So we'd like now so thank you, all of you, for sharing your ideas and your thoughts. It's been really, I was taking some notes, and as listening, I just realized that there's sort of 4 themes that ran through this. One was the creativity that you all bring to your work, the collaborative approach, the curiosity, and the caring and the passion for people and for the planet. And it just gives us all such great hope to see that. So, so I want to now turn to introducing a video about communities building future. And we all agree that the COVID tidal wave has brought huge disruptions for young people across Canada, and as has been evidenced from Melody Barnes's comments, in the US as well. However, in some of these cases, this presents a critical moment of opportunity. And Tamarack has really asked the question, how might we re-envision youth engagement as an opportunity to work alongside youth to create hope now in a post-pandemic future? So Tamarack has an ambitious plan to transform the lives of youth. Tamarack, the Communities Building Youth Futures, is a collective impact movement in partnership with the Government of Canada through the Goal Getters program. We have committed to a 5-year pan-Canadian project to develop collective impact and systems-wide solutions with and for youth as they build and act upon the plans of their future. So now if we could tee up the video and just show this short promotional video on Communities Building Youth Futures.
Here at Tamarack, we believe that the future is shaped by our youth, not just because they'll inherit our home, which they will, and not just because they have all the best ideas, which they might, but because they have the passion, care, and commitment to make the world a truly beautiful place. So then why aren't the voices of young people amplified more? Why are so many struggling to be heard? And why do so many face systemic barriers that keep them from achieving goals for our planet? Young people understand the importance of community change, and Tamarack understands the importance of supporting our youth through their journey to adulthood. That's how Communities Building Youth Futures was born. Working in partnership with the Learning Branch, Employment and Social Development Canada, the Tamarack Institute is implementing a 5-year collective impact strategy to help increase high school graduation rates for youth facing barriers. We've met and will continue to meet with many young people in order to better understand their needs straight from the source. We've consulted with and will have ongoing consultations with youth-serving organizations to hear innovative approaches to youth engagement and to help identify policies and practices that remove barriers for youth. Additionally, we've recruited 13 Communities Building Youth Futures community youth initiatives from all across Canada with the goal of supporting up to 5,000 young people through their education to employment journey, ranging from Chilliwack, BC to Yellowknife, Northwest Territories to Corner Brook, Newfoundland and Labrador. Communities Building Youth Futures aims to support youth and communities by providing tools and resources. In March 2020, we hosted our first national gathering in Kitchener, Ontario. Over 2.5 days, attendees met, mingled, and learned new information to take back to their respective communities and to set up their own community youth initiative. Monique Miles from Aspen Institute shared insights and learnings from her experience leading the Opportunity Youth Forum, a collective impact initiative serving 1.2 million young people in the United States. And graffiti artist Moises Frank wowed us all with an art-based community building activity. 97% of surveyed attendees made one or more new connections. In June 2020, Tamarack also launched an official newsletter, a free bi-monthly online magazine that offers the latest resources and articles on collaboration and community change to support young people, as well as information for all of our upcoming events and learning opportunities. We are just getting started in our journey to make lasting change in building youth futures, and we still need more like-minded people to help us get there. Join us and connect, learn, and collaborate with other changemakers at local and national levels. Learn more about collective impact, youth engagement, and how changemakers are creating education, training, and employment opportunities for young people in their communities and across Canada. Are you a young person, a community organizer, or part of the government, business, or education sectors? Visit www.tamarackcommunity.ca for more information on how you can join the Communities Building Youth Futures movement.
So I don't know about the rest of you, but I have been so inspired by that last panel and by the video. I am so excited about what is happening with Communities Building Youth Futures. And I want to just take a few minutes to give you a sense of just how involved and engaged youth are at each level in this initiative. They have started efforts in to keep them engaged in education, and it's a big part of what's going on with this program. Now, since the beginning of Communities Building Youth Futures initiative, there have been 109 youth engaged on local leadership tables. There's been 54 youth hired as backbone staff, 252 youth engaged in developing or implementing innovation fund projects, 3,000 youth have participated in engagement activities, programs, and projects. 413 multi-sector leaders participated in community site visits. 503 individual local partners involved in the Community Building Youth Futures initiative, 522 new working groups, networks, partnerships, and 14 innovative projects that have been launched to support youth outcomes. Nobody can say that Tamarack doesn't measure things. We measure things, because by measuring things, we're saying what's important, and where youth are in this whole program is key. We're really excited that we've had a chance to really hear from young people in this context, and I took away so many lessons. And sitting on the board, I heard Brandon, Alex, Anna, Natalie, we've got work to do. We've really got work to do to bring about systems change. Now we're get to hear from a few other board members. Over to you, Brock.
Great, thanks a lot, Shauna. Yes, as we did yesterday, we're going to have a couple of Tamarack board members summarize just some of their thoughts on the morning. So first we'll have Adama Patterson and then Kate Gunn. Adama is currently manager of poverty reduction and community engagement in the Human Services Department at the Region of Peel, where she leads the implementation of a 10-year poverty reduction strategy and supports initiatives that increase community safety and well-being for residents in Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon. Adama is a long-standing member of the city's Reducing Poverty and a member of Tamarack's Board of Directors. She was a 2010 Diverse City Fellow and member of the Civic Action Steering Committee. She also serves on the Board of Directors of the Jamaican Canadian Association, a 58-year-old cultural and membership organization, and the Toronto Community Benefits Network. So if we'll hear from Adama in a second, I just want to introduce Kate. Kate and I often talk to each other about retirement because Kate and I retired somewhere around the same time. Kate, in the last 15 years, Kate and her teams have supported and led a variety of complex community change initiatives in Edmonton. These include the Community Safety Task Force that led to the creation of REACH Edmonton, Edmonton's signature Winter City Strategy, Edmonton's Women's Initiative, and Recover, Edmonton's Urban Wellness Plan. From 2014 to 2016, Kate and her team supported the community leadership of Mayor Don Iveson's task force to end poverty in Edmonton in the development of a bold strategy and a 5-year roadmap. This work formed the foundation of a new community-driven collective called End Poverty Edmonton, and profiled the pivotal role cities play in convening and working collaboratively with communities, advancing innovative approaches to social issues, and sparking a shift in both attitudes and systems. I have to say, as Shauna has said many times, it's a huge pleasure to work with folks in the board of directors at Tamarack, and particularly with Adama and Kate. So Adama, over to you. You got any thoughts on how you've seen the morning?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Brock and Shauna and Kate. I'm
calling in or in Brampton, Ontario right now, which of course is part of the Treaty Lands and Territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit. And it's so apt that the sun is shining. We have not seen the sun shine here in the Greater Toronto Area in several days. And so appropriate as we elevate and shine that spotlight on youth. Yesterday was focused on the role of municipal leaders, elected officials at the local level in ending poverty. And we saw some great examples. And today, I think, again, our thinking was challenged around how we meaningfully engage and include young people in the work we do. How do we test and challenge and listen to them as they try to dismantle, disrupt, and really lead the work, as many of the speakers said, for change. I think that a couple of things I heard throughout the morning was the importance of bringing your whole self, and young people challenging even the definition of prosperity. What does prosperity mean? It's not that traditional definition of money only, career, which Anna aptly spoke about, this idea of capitalism and it being grounded in white supremacy and colonialism. But that prosperity means so much. It means not having to worry about paying that bill. It also is about the relationships, wanting to contribute, feel like your voice is heard, that you are an equal player at decision-making tables. And that's a theme I took away and I think is, again, really impossible. We too in Peel Region, are thinking about engagement with and for young people and what that looks like. And I think there were some really important lessons around making sure that that space is there and that the way young people organize and push for change needs to be part of the work. So things like the participatory engagement, leading change and influencing change, and that youth should control their stories and narratives. I heard the call to action, like Shauna mentioned. Definitely need to do more for and with youth. And that COVID, of course, is reversing some of the progress made for many young people. Melody spoke about the high unemployment rate as a result of the pandemic in the States. And I know for sure that is the case here. It's actually quite worrisome, the unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds in Canada. And I know Mr. Cheggers, talked about the summer jobs program and an unprecedented number. And again, how else can we push those boundaries and make sure that young people who didn't have access before COVID and the pandemic are really, those opportunities are created and continue. What else did I hear? Again, just around the sharing of space and this notion of power and what is power and how do we, move aside, right? To make sure that we are sharing power and that we are challenging ourselves when we are in positions of power. Finally, so for me, that was so impactful. How are you sharing it? How are we including youth? And I heard the passion and commitment from the panelists around why they do this work. And I know for many of us on the Tamarack board, it's a similar thing. We are passionate about community, about change, and challenging who we are, making ourselves better so that we can think about the systems that need to be dismantled and that we are part of that process. Just some of my reflections, Brock, for the morning.
Thanks, Adam. The word that I hear frequently in what you just said is challenge. Challenging traditional views, challenging ourselves, challenging ourselves who are in place, if we hold power. It's a really important message for hope if we are going to find change in society. So thank you for those thoughts. Kate, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Brock and Shauna and Doma for those reflections too. Hi, everybody. I'd like to say first that I'm speaking to you from a very sunny Edmonton, Odama, just like where you are. Very sunny today. Hopefully the weather is going up to about 20, and certainly like to acknowledge that I'm here on Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional and the contemporary gathering place for Indigenous peoples, Métis and Inuit. So like many of you, I have memories of past gatherings of Tamarack. In fact, I just noted that it was 6 years ago today in the year 2015 that many of us were in Ottawa together at the Tamarack gathering. And it was a snowy day in Edmonton that day. So things can change. I'm pleased to say that change can happen. But it was always, I've been really pleased to be involved with these Communities Ending Poverty, which is the new name for this past number of years, beginning really with the work that we started here in Edmonton to end poverty in 2014, as Brock was mentioning. And I think it's the energy and the learnings are really what are exciting. And to me, it's quite exciting to actually see that this is the largest gathering that Tamarack has had. And that is a silver lining of this pandemic, is the opportunity to extend those boundaries and to reach out to more people. And especially to have this focus today on youth. And so I just have a few reflections too, from listening to Minister Chagger and Melody Barnes and the amazing panel that Natalie convened and moderated. I think Minister Chagger really set the stage when she said that, it's really important that we articulate that young people are the leaders of today, not only of tomorrow, but most importantly, they are our leaders today. And I think that really struck for me what I felt was a theme that ran through the keynote and also through the panel. But one of the first things that Melody Barnes said that really resonated with me was that solutions and answers to these big complex challenges are always found in community. Like that has been my experience, having worked with the local government here in Edmonton for 17 years, is that community is always, if not very often, ahead of the local government. They know what's needed. They are the experts in the community. And so I really feel that communities do lead the way. And of course, youth are a very critical voice in that. I think Melody also looked at and said, what communities are succeeding in addressing poverty? And she said, those are the ones that really mobilize people, that bring people together, and not just a small group of people, but a very diverse group of perspectives. And as Brock mentioned, I had the chance, the huge honor of working on the Mayor's Task Force that Mayor Don Iveson co-chaired with Bishop Jane Alexander for several years in 2014 and 15. And it was really about bringing members of the community together, diverse members of the community, to look for new solutions. And I just wanted to share with you that, in fact, in that work, there was a huge role that was played by by a group of young people in Edmonton, who work with the John Humphrey Center for Peace and Human Rights. And they came forward to the task force in the very early months and said, we are really passionate about this plan that you have and this mandate to outline how we're going to end poverty intergeneration in the city. And we want to bring our ideas forward to you. And they took several months, and they came back after having done their own research independently, and came back with a slate of 4 recommendations for the task force that they believed would be central for young people and for ending poverty in this city. And they were about decriminalizing poverty, making it easier to vote and to participate in city channels of work and policy development, reviewing city services to make sure they're accessible to marginalized people, and eliminating racism and building a culture of dignity. And those 4 key recommendations really shaped the work of End Poverty Edmonton. They brought a human rights lens to this work, and they grounded it in that approach. And so I just think that the voice, I think what Adoma had said about, as we heard today, about making space and having that open door and that open mind to listen to different perspectives, really contributes to really solid and better outcomes. I also found, frankly, as I was listening to the panel and to Melody and Minister Chagger today, a common thread around changing the narrative. We heard yesterday a little bit about touching on what are the words we use, what's the language we use, because we know that the words we use shape the solutions we look for. They shape the things we fund, they shape our priorities. And I think that was really something that was very important to us in the work to end poverty in Edmonton. We began by looking at reducing poverty when the task force was convened. And very quickly, we said, the goal here is not to reduce poverty. That is not what we want to achieve in a generation. We want to end it. This was in 2014. And I think that to some people that seemed like a daunting goal and a bold goal and maybe a naive, expectation. We certainly got lots of feedback on this idea of ending poverty at that time. We found out from Edmontonians, in fact, when we talked to them, that people found, including youth, and this group of youth I mentioned from the John Humphrey Center, that bold goal was an invitation to be part of the solution, that people want to see that they're part of something bigger. And so I think that changing of the language is something very, very important that was resonating throughout. And we heard it in the panel with the talk about wellness and prosperity and what does it mean to be successful. And I really liked, I think, what I heard Minister Chagger say at the very end, which was to say to youth, if I have one piece of advice, it is do things differently. Do it differently than the generation before you has done. And I think that is excellent advice. I really like to, thank Brandon and Alex and Anna. I feel that when I listen to them, our future is in good hands. We're in a very difficult time now with COVID-19. And I'm reminded of something that someone once said, that the greatest danger in times of turbulence, which I think we're in right now, is not the turbulence, but it is to act with yesterday's logic. And I think that is the danger, is to think that old paradigms and old words and old approaches from this past century, these past decades, are the things that are going to solve the issues that we have. I don't think that's right. We have so many things like prosperity, even looking at what cities mean to us. What's infrastructure? Isn't it about people and social capital? It's not just about steel and roadways. And that we really, there are so many of these things that are really a shift. So I think the minister's call to young people today, and from what I heard with Anna and Brandon and Alex too, is that it is time to do things differently. And we need different perspectives in order to do that. So I'm really looking forward to the workshops this afternoon. And I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to share some of the reflections on the amazing presentations today.
Great. Thanks so much, Kate. What I hear you saying is that finding new ways is really important, and it's through community. At the community level where there's diversity and participation and caring. And if we want to be a nation that ends poverty, we need to start at the community level. I think those are really useful words to summarize. Thank you very much, Kate. Thanks very much, Adama. Shauna, back to you.
I wanted to say that one of the big learnings I had a number of years ago from some of Indigenous scholars and elders was that the whole art of witnessing. And there are 4 of us from this board, and then Anna is also on the board. That's 5 of us witnessing what we heard today. And witnessing isn't just witnessing what we're hearing, but it's bringing back. And so I think that there's a real challenge for us as board members of Tamarack to ensure that what has come out of yesterday and today and what will come out of the workshops is really brought in, and that we act from a place of heart and love and bring forward these messages. So thank you so much. I'm going to go through a bit of the housekeeping because we're getting ready for this afternoon as well. So we're going to take a 20-minute break after we've heard from our elders, and we are going to reconvene Eastern Time at 2 p.m. For our Zoom meeting, and those will be the workshops. And the dial-in details for the workshops can be found in May 6 workshops at the House Space. It's at the top of the House Space screen on the tabs. And when you drop down that menu, click on the workshop you'd like to attend, and you'll find the dial-in information to those workshop pages. Now, in round 2 workshops, which are at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. for those of you in Vancouver, 2 in Edmonton, and what is it, 5:30 in St. John's, Newfoundland. Communities Building Youth Futures participants can choose to take a break and come back for the evening of youth art and plenary at 5:45, or they can join an open networking session. And during open networking, you can connect informally with others from across the country, share your reflections and insights. And the networking lobby will include virtual rooms that you can go out and have host your own conversations on whatever topics, a real open space. And you can contact Dan in English or Jean-Marie in French if you have trouble getting into any of those spaces. So that's for the youth. Now, in the next few minutes, we are going to also be uploading Asma's graphic recording from this morning's sessions. And if you have a chance, go to HowSpace, take a look and interact with Asma. There's a chance, Asma has a chance for you to ask her questions in the chat box and really get comments. Really encourage you to look at that because they're incredible graphic recordings. Now, before I hand it over to Brock and the elders for our final closing before the workshops, I just want to say a personal thank you. This has been an amazing couple of days, and there are so many people behind the scenes that are doing work here and that are holding us up and helping keep things together. Just think of what it takes to get people on and off screens, to engage with HowSpace. I've been looking up, you could see my eyes looking up. That's each time I'm looking at HowSpace and just getting a sense of what's going on there. It's been such a pleasure being a part of this yesterday and today. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful learning experience, extremely rich. And that learning experience didn't start with these 2 days. It started with reading all of those posts on HowSpace. So I want to say thank you to all of the Tamarack staff, to all the youth that have been part of this, to all of our community partners. And Brock, I've so enjoyed emceeing with you. This is fabulous. So thank you. And now over to you.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. In fact, one of the benefits of my retirement is I seem to be working more collaboratively with you on various things, including all the work we're doing together in Tamarack. I certainly echo all of the comments you made about the thank yous and the impressive discussions we've had over the last 2 days. I just, as a final thought, you, Shauna, were talking about witnessing and bringing back what we witness. It cycles right back to what I said at the beginning. What was so important about this event was learning from each other, confirming what works and doing differently what doesn't work, and going away from this event with new things to do to improve equity and end poverty. So now I'd like to introduce Elder Wallace Alexson and Elder Florence Alexson to close the Community Ending Poverty Summit. Elders, over to you. Okay, they're just getting teed up, so we'll just once again reinforce the really wonderful experience that this couple of days has been for all of us involved. And as Shauna said, it really gives us and the Tamarack board a deeper appreciation of some of the work that Tamarack is doing and needs to do in order to be as effective as an organization and as a governance structure supporting that organization. So now let's turn it over to Elders Wallace and Florence Alexson.
So are we muted or are we okay?
No, we're fine.
Okay. Well, first off, I'd like to say, Miigwech, thank you for asking us to participate. And it makes us feel very good that, as an indigenous people, that we'd like to help out wherever we can. We're people of the land, and we do natural law, that type of thing. We do a lot of ceremonial stuff, and yeah, we appreciate the invitation. Miigwech. I'm gonna, normally what we do is after the session is over, if we were in a small group of say 12 to 15 people or so, we'd all stand, form a circle, and we'd smudge and say a prayer. and I would be the lead person to do the prayers and that. But each and every one of us will say our own prayer in whichever language or religious group that you belong to, each in his own way. And with that, we would afterwards sing a closing song, thanking Creator that, he helped us out with what we had to do with the session. And normally that's what we would do. So now we're going to have to do this virtually. In our minds, I guess we'll form a circle and ask each and every one of you to consider all the good things in life that we have that take place on a daily basis. All your family, all your relatives, etc., etc. Even the big thing is to thank their Creator for giving us this opportunity to test Earth out, the planet Earth. Gives us a short time on Earth, but it certainly does good things. So with that, I'm gonna do the prayer, and then we'll do the closing song, and we'll be pretty much done afterwards. After that, shut down. Thank you for coming to sit with us, Creator. Thank you for that. Today, we ask that you look after our people, look after each and every one of us, all our families, all our relatives, relations, friends. We ask you to watch over each and every one of us, that good things happen in the future. And we ask today that you look after this project that we're trying to and do, and good things to happen for us. Creator, thank you for coming to sit with us. Thank you for looking after all our people. We ask a blessing for each and every one of the individuals here and everybody in this universe and world called Earth. All living things. We ask blessings for everybody. Thank you for looking after us. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sing the closing song that we normally sing in our with our people. And when I'm doing that, just be very grateful about life as it is on this planet. It is a beautiful time that we've been given, a very short time, but good. Thank you for coming to sit with us, Creator. Thank you for being there for us at all times. Thank you again from the bottom of our hearts, and we ask a blessing for each and every one of our people that are involved in this sessions today. Thank you for that. Just a little information on that song I was singing. That's a song that sends good vibes to the Creator for always being with us and looking after us as we go through this life. Anyway, it's a simple little song, but it sure hits the spot when it's, you know, when we end our sessions. So anyway, that's the end of our little spiel here, and thank you for listening. Miigwech, as we say in our language, it means thank you.
Thank you very much.